Good evening, everybody. The FY 24-25 budget for transportation and judicial and corrections. Just so you all know what we're doing, and Madam Administrator, are we on and ready to go? Thank you. We're going to hear from you. We're not asking any questions because the public hearing is about all of you. So we're here to hear what you have to say, not what we have to say back to you, what you have to say to us. So that's what that is all about. Up first is Julia Wilcox. Julia, you have 3 minutes.
Good evening, Madam Chair and distinguished members of the committee. My name is Julia Wilcox, Senior Public Policy and Division Advisor at the Connecticut Community Nonprofit Alliance. The Alliance is the statewide advocacy organization representing the nonprofit sector. Community nonprofits provide essential services to over 500,000 individuals and families in Connecticut every year and employ 117,000 Connecticut workers, improving the quality of life in communities across the state. Thank you for the opportunity to testify on the governor's budget. The Alliance respectfully requests you increase funding for community nonprofits during the biennium by 9% in fiscal year 24 and 7% in fiscal year 25. This funding is crucial to honoring your long-term plan to increase funding for nonprofits because it makes up for the high inflation nonprofits have experienced over the last 2 years. The increases that committee has fought so hard for to provide in the last biennium were deeply appreciated by those who depend on these vital services. However, these increases were just the start of a long-term effort to compensate for historically inadequate funding. The governor's proposal to close Woodward Correctional Facility will result in a $6.5 million annual savings to the state. We commend the governor and the commissioner of DOC for their vision and commitment to criminal justice reform. Unfortunately, the budget does not propose to reinvest these savings into the community programs that are crucial to serving people who would have been sentenced to prison in the past. In fact, none of the savings from the prison closures of the last decade, a combined $20 million annually since 2021, have been reinvested in community programs, even though providers have been asked to serve more people with increasingly complex service requirements. The budget also proposes to cut community-based juvenile justice services provided by the judicial branch at a time when we should be investing in community-based solutions as opposed to cutting them. You have my detailed testimony, and I would encourage you to look at the research on page 2, but I'd like to focus on just a few very quick points, if I may. Nonprofits are currently serving approximately 4,000 returning citizens in total. At the same time, since 2013, the number of admissions to DOC facilities has decreased by more than 11,600 people. So while the shift to serving more people in the community has a substantially positive impact on the population, again, the nonprofit network is faced with supporting more people with these increasingly complex needs, everything from mental health to substance use and beyond. The increasing level of need is substantiated in the State of Reentry report that was released on February 15th. I've provided a link to that report, but even more importantly, this evening, you'll hear from not only the authors of the report, but from the individuals and families who are living the core of these issues every single day. And I'll end there with a sincere thank you for all of your support of the nonprofit network.
Thank you, Julia. Have a nice night. Up next is Fernando Muniz. Oh, there you go.
Good evening, Senator Austin and distinguished members of the Appropriations Committee. My name is Fernando Muniz, and I'm the CEO of Community Solutions. We're a nonprofit organization headquartered here in Connecticut. Since 1962, we have provided residential reentry services for people leaving Connecticut's prisons, day reporting centers for people on probation, and support for young people in Connecticut's foster care system. Thank you for the opportunity to testify on the governor's budget. I'm here to request that you increase funding for community nonprofits during the biennium by 9% in fiscal year 24 and 7% in fiscal year 25, and to index future increases to inflation. As Julia said before me, the increases the legislature provided in the last biennium were deeply appreciated by Connecticut's nonprofit service providers. With the funding the legislature approved, we were able to raise the salaries of our frontline staff and keep our halfway houses and group homes open. Given the job market we've been facing over the last several years, I'm convinced we would have had to close some of our programs without this additional funding. Hundreds of people could have lost out on critical supports they need to successfully re-enter the community. While the funding was critical to the survival of our programs, inflation has eaten into the advances that we've made in the last year. The job market continues to be extremely challenging. Our organization's current vacancy rate is 15%. It is typically below 10%. So we have many, many more vacancies than we would have under normal circumstances. And we're competing with large retail corporations and other companies for a limited applicant pool. Our current staff are working overtime to cover shifts in our residential programs, and they report an unprecedented level of burnout. In addition to the challenges with the job market, other costs have also skyrocketed due to inflation. The cost of health insurance for employees, office supplies, food to feed our clients, and maintenance costs for our vehicles have all increased significantly over the last year. Without predictable funding increases indexed to inflation, nonprofit organizations like ours will be forced to close programs that benefit our most vulnerable citizens. I echo my colleague Julia's call for justice reinvestment. The closure of Willard Correctional Facility will save $6.5 million a year, and those dollars could go a long way for reinvestment in the current service system that we have. Organizations like mine are contracted to provide work release services, but the clients that we're getting have increasingly complex medical, psychological, and substance use needs, and they need additional support. The budget also proposes to cut community-based juvenile justice services provided by the judicial branch. Currently, the judicial branch doesn't have enough residential capacity for the juveniles that it serves. If community-based services are also cut and there's not enough residential capacity, more young people may end up in the adult criminal justice system. So thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Up next is Leslie Foltz from online. I don't see her. After that is Jeffrey Geronimo, number 3B.
Good evening, Madam Chair and members of the committee. My name is
Sorry
Jeffy.
about the last name.
No worries. It's been butchered a little bit worse than that. So no problems. My name is Jeffy Geronimo, and I am the interim CEO of Perception Programs in Willimantic. Perception Programs is a 501(c) nonprofit that serves Greater Windham, Towson, and London counties for mental health and substance use disorders. We operate 2 DOC houses in Willimantic. One of our houses serves women that are coming out of parole and community supervision, and they have coexisting disorders with emphasis on clinical treatment for severe mental health. While our other house is a halfway house. We also have the Alternative in the Community AIC program in Willimantic and the assist contract through the judicial branch. The increases that the legislature provided in the last biennium were deeply appreciated by those who depend on the vital services that nonprofits provide in every city in Connecticut. But it's just the start of a long-term effort to make up for lost funding. But these advances could be lost if increases do not continue, given the magnitude of inflation on top of the nonprofit funding deficit that we're already facing. We have submitted several written testimonies from current and former clients that have been or are being served by our programs. As I read through these testimonies, it's a point of pride for me on how our programs and our staff have helped these women to overcome their challenges. Just to highlight one, I am reminded about a woman who was admitted to Grace House, which is our DOC house that serves people coming out of parole and community supervision. The woman who first came into Grace House, she kept to herself, she was quiet, did not initially interact with staff or peers. But during her time at Grace House, she engaged in treatment. She began volunteering at Access Agency, another agency in Willimantic. She reunified with her family and was able to successfully transition to our next step, our work release halfway house. This doesn't typically happen. She gained gainful employment, something that she's never done before. She began to smile. She began to tell jokes. We saw her evolve into an entirely different person. She worked overtime every week, saved her money, and she was discharged to Bill's house, one of our recovery houses, where she currently is residing and is doing very well. She is a manager at her place of employment, engages in treatment, is stable in her sobriety, and has an entirely different life than before she ever came through our doors. I want to thank you for the opportunity to provide my perspective on the budget. Please support increasing funding for community nonprofits by 9% in fiscal year 24 and 7% in fiscal year 25, and to index future increases to inflation. I ask for the support so that we can continue to provide the vital resources to our community by creating hope and changing lives, as we have with the woman that I mentioned previously. Thank you and have a good evening.
Thank you. You too. Up next is Jessica Pizano.
Good evening, Senator Austin, Representative Walker, and members of the Appropriations Committee. My name is Jessica Pizano, and I'm the Director of Victim Services for Survivors of Homicide, Inc. I have been involved in the field of victim services for almost 19 years, with 17 of those years working with secondary survivors of homicide across the state of Connecticut. However, I am not here this evening representing the agency that I work for, but rather to share my personal thoughts and feelings to urge you to support the provision in HB number 6659 to enhance funding for victim service providers, because every day I see the incredible importance that these programs have in helping victims of crime. This proposed funding provision is a direct result of the devastating loss of the Victims of Crime Act VOCA funds that support providing comprehensive, no-cost, and trauma-informed services to victims of crime. VOCA funds, which are generated from federal criminal fines and fees, are at an all-time low due to fines being redirected to the general treasury under the previous administration. This has resulted in a 50% cut in VOCA funding for victim service agencies in the state as well as across the country. While VOCA funding increased from $5 million to $36.5 million between fiscal year 2013 through 2018, that money was reduced to $15.6 million in fiscal year 2022. VOCA funding levels have continued to lag and are not expected to ever reach the funding level as seen in 2018. In short, without the assistance from the state of Connecticut, victim service agencies will close, and the result would be catastrophic to victims of crime. I would like to thank Governor Wilmot for his proposal to include a $13.1 million allocation to the judicial branch to supplement the lack of federal VOCA funds in Connecticut. These funds ensure victims have access to critical support, counseling, advocacy, and help to navigate the complex criminal justice system. Many victim service providers in Connecticut, including Survivors of Homicide, Inc., Connecticut Coalition Against Domestic Violence, Connecticut Alliance to End Sexual Violence, Love 146, Connecticut Children's Alliance, The Village, and Mothers Against Drunk Driving, among many others, rely heavily on VOCA funding. It would not be able to continue to provide the same level of vital services to survivors of crime without this funding allocation. Victim service providers are not asking for increased funding. They are simply asking for funds to help to fulfill the 50% VOCA cut so they can continue to operate at their current level. Without these funds, many agencies will experience either staff layoffs or even their doors closing. Through my experience in working with victims of crime, I have seen firsthand how VOCA service providers can help a survivor on their journey to build their new life. Survivors like shelter for victims of domestic violence, one-on-one counseling, support groups, and accompaniment and advocacy through court cases are essential to their healing process. And the loss of this support would be devastating for those survivors who have already experienced so much loss and pain. Victim service providers are not only there to help alleviate.
You're over your 3 minutes.
Oh, apologies.
All set?
All set, thank you.
Thank you, Jessica. Appreciate your testimony. Up next is Maria Abril. I don't see her online. After that is Megan Scanlon.
Good evening, Madam Chair, Representative Candelaria, Senator Winfield, and the distinguished members of the committee. My name is Megan Scanlon. I'm the CEO at the Connecticut Coalition Against Domestic Violence. Unfortunately, I come before you again this year to ask for your continued assistance with, as Jessica stated, the federal funding issue facing all victim service providers in the state of Connecticut, including CCADV and our 18-member organizations. Connecticut, like all states, is continuing to face the 50% cut from the Victims of Crime Act grant. VOCA funds some of the core services provided by CCADV and our 18-member organizations, so a reduction of this magnitude would devastate our ability to meet the needs of survivors across the state. I want to thank Governor Lamont for including in his budget proposal just over $13 million in ARPA funds to cover the offset of the federal funding reduction in fiscal '24. This amount keeps all of Connecticut's victim service providers level funded for fiscal year '24, including $3.8 million specifically for CCADV and our 18-member organizations across the state. We are asking this to committee to support the fiscal '24 proposal from Governor Lamont, while also ensuring that domestic violence service providers get the $3.8 million we need in fiscal '25 by including an additional $20 million in fiscal '25 to keep the state's entire victim service system whole. VOCA is a substantial funding source for CCDV and our 18-member organizations. It funds approximately 127 direct service domestic violence advocates across the state, including criminal and civil court advocates who guide survivors through the court process, adult advocates who provide counseling, safety planning, and basic needs, advocacy for survivors, law enforcement advocates who serve as a liaison between local police departments, and VOCA is the sole funding source for our statewide domestic violence hotline. You'll hear tonight from several of our member advocates and survivors about the real impact that not filling the gap would have on nearly 40,000 domestic violence survivors and their children that we serve each year. We know that the VOCA funding gap is not a problem that was created by the state, but we certainly appreciate the support in the past and this current year. Connecticut has long relied on this federal funding source to support a variety of victim services, including domestic violence services. However, given the annual receipts to VOCA funds continue to shrink and that this year's allocation cap exceeds the fund balance, we believe that the fund will be an unstable source of funding for the foreseeable future. We believe that it is time for the state and its nonprofit partners to engage in conversations about sustainable funding for victim services in Connecticut. CCADV is eager to join this conversation and help create a cohesive, sustainable, and impactful plan for meeting the needs of domestic violence survivors and all victims of crime in Connecticut. In the meantime, we urge the committee to keep victim services in Connecticut whole through the biennium by supporting Governor Lamont's fiscal '24 proposal and ensuring that domestic violence service providers get $3.8 million we need in fiscal '25 by including an additional $20 million in the second year of the budget. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much, Megan. Up next is Travis Woodward. Travis.
Good evening, Senator Austin and members of the Appropriation Committee. My name is Travis Woodward. I'm a resident of Hamden and an engineer for the Connecticut Department of Transportation. I'm also the president of CSEA SEIU Local 2001, a labor union representing over 25,000 state, municipal, Board of Ed, active and retired public and private sector workers. I offer the following testimony on the budget for the Department of Transportation. Like many agencies in Connecticut, our department was hit hard by the silver tsunami last year. This wave ended up driving many of our most experienced and talented members to retirement. The Bureau of Engineering and Construction was hit particularly hard, and we currently have over 20% vacancies in this section of the department. The retirement wave could not have come at a worse time, with the federal infrastructure package arriving concurrently. The competition for skilled professional engineers has not been more fierce amongst public and private sectors in each state. The Department of Transportation, like many state agencies, does not have a steady rate of hiring, hindering our ability to keep a maintained and modern infrastructure. While the retirement spike nudged all of those employees hired prior to 1990 out the door, those hired in a wave in 1996 are poised to leave prior to 2026, creating another impending retirement crisis. We need to staff up the DOT now to maximize critical knowledge transfer prior to this taking place. DAS has taken steps to revamp their hiring practices to reduce the amount of time it takes to hire staff, but they're still far behind the private sector in other states, many of which we are in direct competition with. I'm not saying we have to hire first and ask questions later, but we have to move quickly to ensure we are attracting the talent we need. When our department was understaffed in the past, the DOT must supplement its workforce with private consultants. These private consultants come at a large premium cost to the tune of $100 million annually. In just the design engineering, construction oversight inspection, and bridge inspection sections alone, all while offering the same skill set as in-house employees who could do the work better, faster, and for less. Every year we fail to plan for the future of our infrastructure, we are putting working families in the position of having to foot the bill for hundreds of millions of dollars in unnecessary spending, all while providing a subpar product. Failing to fully staff and fund the Department of Transportation is a bad deal for our state. I urge you to pass a budget that will allow DOT to hire needed staff with the resources we need and focus on cost-effective work performed by in-house state employees. We can build and maintain roads, bridges, and highways that keep Connecticut moving. I'd like to thank you for hearing my testimony. You too.
Thank you. Have a nice night. Up next is Jen Lawler. No, I don't see her. And Jennifer Shaddad. I don't see her. Scott Wilderman. Sir, the floor is yours. 3 minutes.
Thank you. Good evening, members of the Appropriations Committee. My name is Scott Wilderman, and I'm the President and CEO of Career Resources. I want to testify tonight about the importance of creating a justice reinvestment fund from the savings recognized by the closing of Willard Correctional Facility. With the closing of this facility, we have a very unique opportunity to reinvest $6.5 million through the creation of a justice reinvestment fund under DOC. The goal of this fund would be to design and implement innovative, data-driven, and comprehensive approaches to reduce crime, cut recidivism rates, and direct resources towards more cost-effective safety strategies. Some of these strategies we are encouraging the state to invest in are in the reentry welcome centers, hang time, and the iBest Second Chance programming. You're going to hear tonight from several participants of these programs, and you will learn firsthand how these innovative and data-driven initiatives improve their chances at successful reintegration while reducing recidivism and making our communities safer. The Reentry Welcome Center concept started about 3 years ago with the launch of the Hartford site. The Welcome Centers are fairly a new initiative, but they play an integral role between DOC and the community. The centers serve as the main handoff point from DOC to the community, thus avoiding the negative stigma of a person being dropped off in the middle of downtown or on a green with no resources available to them. These centers have trained community personnel that provide individual intake and referrals with everything from housing assistance, behavioral health, medical services to employment and job training. Most of the participants are considered end of sentence, meaning that they have served their full sentence with DOC and are no longer under DOC custody. The current funding for these centers is very volatile, as they are funded mostly through private philanthropy and ARPA dollars. And that will be these dollars will be sunsetting over the next year. Preliminary data from these centers is also very encouraging, as the recidivism rates for some show less than 5%. Collectively, these centers have assisted over 1,000 returning citizens annually. Without stable funding for these centers, EOS clients would not have a formal place to go and are more likely to recidivate as they flounder for resources to survive. Therefore, we're asking the state to invest $5 million to fully fund these 5 centers. With Hang Time was created and launched as a grassroots effort to foster community and give a voice to men and women returning citizens who have often been silent or unheard of far too long. The targeted group are those that are involved with gang or group violence and those that inherently suffer from post-traumatic stress disorders resulting from urban gun violence. It is a 2-hour-long gathering once every week in Bridgeport, Hartford, New Haven, and Waterbury. Over 3,000 people have participated in Hang Time. This unlikely brotherhood and sisterhood of ex-offenders, legal and community leaders grow stronger each and every week as they come together for a meal and group conversation. The environment is always welcoming and an informal forum for discussion. These free-flowing discussions run the gamut, covering topics from politics, race relations, economics, cultural diversity, as well as ways to conduct oneself during the encounter with the police. Hang Time has been embraced as a best practice model and is now being launched in other states. Currently, funding for Hang Time and its affiliated programs comes through private donations, and we are requesting $500,000 be set aside for this critical initiative. Finally, we have the Second Chance Integrated Basic Skills Training, IBEST. Currently, this program is partially funded by the state, around $300,000 in the Department of Labor budget. We are urging the state to increase funding for this initiative by $500,000, as it was once funded at $1.2 million. The IBEST program is demonstrably successful.
Wrap it up now, please.
Sure. So I'll wrap it up just saying, in closing, we hope that the state will consider funding these important initiatives through the creation of a justice reinvestment fund. We know that supporting these data-driven programs will be able to decrease recidivism and enhance family reunification that make our communities safer and families stronger. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Up next is Kathleen Duchene.
Good evening, Senator Austin and members of the Appropriations Committee. I'm Kathleen Duchene, the CEO for Connecticut Renaissance. We're an organization that provides mental health, addiction, and criminal justice services to clients throughout New Haven and Fairfield County. We employ 200 staff members, and we serve close to 5,000 people a year. I want to thank you for the opportunity to testify about the governor's budget, and I'm here to request that you increase funding for community nonprofits during the biennium by 9% in fiscal year 2024 and 7% in fiscal year 25, and to index future increases to inflation. At Connecticut Renaissance, with the COLAs from our DOC and CSSD state departments, we've been able to provide salary increases for our staff for the first time in 13 years. And I ask you to imagine going 13 years without a raise, with the cost of rent, utilities, and especially gas has risen astronomically. However, our lowest paid position, even with these increases, continues to earn only $15.50 an hour, which is about $28,000 a year. According to national reports, Connecticut is the 10th most expensive state to rent in. You need to earn a minimum of $41,000 annually to afford a one-bedroom apartment in Connecticut. So many of our employees work 2 and sometimes 3 jobs just to be able to afford basic living expenses. I will say our staff is very grateful to have gotten the COLA increases and also grateful for your support. They know that the legislature understands the plight of the nonprofit and appreciates what you've done over the past couple of years. As the CEO, I too am grateful for the additional funding, not only to be able to increase our staff salaries, but also to address some much needed facility repairs, things like roof replacements and replacing a 40-year-old boiler. And attending to bathroom upgrades and other facility issues that haven't been addressed in years. We ask ourselves how our clients can get well in facilities that are in such disrepair. So this is really important funding for us. The majority of clients that we serve are living at or below the poverty level. We operate 3 work release programs that serve 170 men at any one time. These are men returning from the community to the community from incarceration. They receive case management services and they work with a job developer to find competitive employment. We also refer our clients to our outpatient clinics, as many of them have mental health issues and addiction. Some have both. So while we're addressing their emotional and physical needs, we're also preparing these men to live independently and successfully in the community. Without your support, we simply would not be able to do this. So I want to thank you for your previous support and again urge you to consider these increases in the biennium budget. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Up next is W. Theodore Koch, followed by J. Patton Brown. Mr. Koch, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Good evening, Senator Austin, distinguished members of the committee. I'm Ted Koch from Koch, Garg & Brown, and I'm here to speak in support of the public defender's request for an 80% raise in the assigned counsel rate. You have been given a lot of facts and information about this, and I'm showing up in person to tell you about one assigned counsel. When I graduated from law school, wanted to do international human rights. And I decided that the best way for me to do that is to be in my own state, representing the people here. I worked with my father for over a decade. And assigned counsel work was the bedrock of our practice. And I learned how to do everything from negotiating a little breach of peace to representing somebody in a double murder case. I learned how to do appeals. I learned how to do constitutional post-conviction work. And in 2020, I started my own firm, Koch, Brown, and I wanted assigned counsel work to be the bedrock of that. All along, the rate was good enough to support a middle-class life in Connecticut, but inflationary pressures have made that not possible anymore. And we cannot take these cases anymore. And I say that with a sad heart, because we don't want to get rich. We don't expect to get rich. And I don't think people should get rich doing indigent defense. But what we do need is to not give ourselves a stroke with the caseload that you have to take on now in order to do the work. So we can't take any new cases at this time. We're going to continue with the cases, defend the people we already decided to defend, but we can't take any more until the rate goes up. And I promise you that when the rate does go up, we'll start taking cases again, and it'll be the bedrock of our practice again. There's two facts that I want the committee to remember. The rate hasn't gone up since 2007. And the first inflationary pressure was when health insurance skyrocketed after Obamacare came in. And the second fact is the federal rate to do the exact same work we do in state court, but in federal court, it used to be a little bit higher than the state rate, but because it goes up uncontroversially without requiring any kind of work on anybody's behalf, with the cost of living, it steadily rises. It has now dwarfed the state rate. It's more than double. It's $164 an hour to do a felony trial in federal court, and it's $75 an hour to do a felony trial in state court, which used to work, but it doesn't anymore. So we're asking you to raise it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Up next is J. Patton Brown. Third. He had to go? Okay, thank you. Next is Conrad Seifert. Mr. Seifert, floor is yours.
Good evening, Conrad Seifert. I'm a resident of East Lyme, and my law practice is in Old Lyme, where I am a sole practitioner. I primarily do appeals, and like Attorney Koch, I have done a great deal of assigned counsel work for over 30 years. And just briefly, the landmark Supreme Court decision of Gideon against Wainwright established that indigent people are entitled to a free defense. Hence, the public defender's offices were created around the early 60s. Now, say 4 people get arrested in a robbery. One could have planned it and be the conspirator. Two could actually do the robbery, and the 4th person is the getaway car driver. This isn't that uncommon. Pretend they're all poor. One of them gets the public defender's office. The other 3 have to be assigned out to those of us who do this indigent defense work for a fraction of going rates that private attorneys get. So it's been fixed at $75 an hour. That doesn't cover, your paralegal or office expenses. It's just a flat $75 an hour. Now, I've been committed to this work, and it's getting harder, like Attorney Koch has said, to do it. I thought that with the budget surpluses that are in effect now, that when the public defender's office presented to the OPM very detailed request with justifying an 80% increase, so that those of us who do this difficult work for the poor at well below market rates, that would have been granted. And instead, the proposed budget comes out with a 0 increase for the public defender's office. And therefore, if this isn't raised to the $135 an hour that the public defender's office requested, more and more and more people like myself and Attorney Koch will just start not doing it because it's truly becoming a crisis. I believe those of us who do assign counsel, the numbers of us have shrunk dramatically, maybe something like 30 to 40%. So it's critical that this get funded correctly. And if that doesn't happen, it's really going to exacerbate a crisis that already exists. And thank you for your consideration.
Thank you very much, sir.
You're welcome.
Up next is Christopher Linus. Linus,
Yes, ma'am.
the floor is yours.
Good evening, distinguished committee. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Go ahead, sir.
Excellent. My name is J. Christopher Linus. I have a small solo law practice out of Portland, Connecticut called Linus Law Immigration and Criminal Defense. And I defend people in criminal, DUI, traffic, and immigration removal cases, both at trial and at the appellate levels. In my time as an attorney, since graduating law school in '97, I've served as a legal aid lawyer in Maine, public defender and a state's attorney, and a private defense attorney in Maryland, and a private defense attorney in Connecticut. And in my entire time working as a private defense attorney in both Maryland and Connecticut, I've done assigned counsel public defender work for the public defender in both states. When I arrived in Connecticut, it's one of the first things I did. In 2015, I got an assigned counsel contract with the OCPD. I currently do assigned counsel work in New London, Part A, Part B, Middletown, Part A, Part B, and appellate. I do it because I love it. I do it because I believe in it. I'm never going to get rich doing it. But I didn't go to law school to get rich. I went to law school to be of service. And if I cared about the money, I'd be doing other kinds of law and I wouldn't be here in front of you now. That being said, however, I have to stay afloat and in the black as a private business enterprise. I have to pay my bills. And doing that while continuing to serve as assigned counsel with the Division of Public Defender is increasingly difficult with the rates remaining the same as they have since 2007. I am here as one person among many who will all be testifying before you now. So like Ted Koch, I'm giving you an individual story. I do this because I love it. I want to do it and I want to keep doing it. But the only way I'm going to be able to keep doing it is if you all raise the rates to a reasonable level that allows us to break even, you know. Right now, it's not a break even proposition. And that's really challenging because I hit a point where, you know, I came up being able to carry a lot of files under my arm, and that has allowed me to continue this. However, I don't think I'm going to be able to do it much longer the way things are going. So I would urge you to increase the assigned counsel rates. And I thank you for the time.
Thank you very much, sir. Up next is Audrey Felson. Audrey,
I'm here.
go ahead.
I'm here.
The floor
Can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you.
Great, thank you. Thank you for allowing me to speak. I'm Audrey Felson, and I'm the president of the Connecticut Criminal Defense Lawyers Association. I'm testifying from a hotel room in Philadelphia. And I'm here in Philadelphia because there's a conference for assigned counsel in the federal system. The opening remarks this morning gave me pause, and I'm excited to share them with you. They were from a federal judge in Pennsylvania who stood up and thanked the group and said, "I'm so proud to be here, and I'm so thankful that assigned counsel comes and represents people and provides effective representation." And he said, and I quote, that it was a source of pride for him, and it gives him true meaning to the constitutional principles of our criminal justice system. CCDLA has been in existence for over 35 years, and its members are public defenders, private counsel, and private counsel who accept assignments to represent indigent clients. We're all compensated differently for our work. We are all united in purpose to zealously represent defendants charged with crimes in the state of Connecticut and to ensure each is afforded the protections guaranteed by our federal and state constitutions. There are simply not enough public defenders in the state of Connecticut to represent indigent clients who are entitled to counsel. Assigned counsel agree to accept appointments to represent clients at a rate significantly less than private practice rates. Attorneys like the ones you heard tonight and the ones you will hear later who accept these appointments are dedicated, experienced, and capable. More importantly, they're essential to the effective functioning and integrity of our criminal justice system and necessary to ensure that those who cannot afford counsel have qualified, competent, and conflict-free representation. The current hourly fee for the CJA panel attorneys, the ones here that were thanked for doing the work at a very low cost, is $164. While much lower than rates charged in private practice, the federal rate provides enough financial incentive to encourage private counsel to continue accepting CJA rates and cases and enables them to meet the financial demands of their practices. Assigned counsel get paid unacceptably low flat rates for certain kinds of cases in Connecticut and equally unsustainable hourly rates for others. All assigned counsel, regardless of experience, get paid the same rate. The fact that the assigned counsel rate has not changed in 15 years is a major reason seasoned trial counsel are increasingly refusing assigned counsel work. As the cost of living continues to rise and assigned counsel rates stay the same, more and more attorneys have had to make the hard choice to turn away the work. They don't want to do this. They love what they do. They're excellent. They're outstanding. They're capable. They're competent. And they defend the rights of Connecticut's residents. This exodus, which has already started, will create significant delays in the appointment of counsel, and the quality of representation will fall below ethical and constitutional standards. Recently, OCPD requested an 80% across the board raise in the assigned counsel rate, which would not even match the current federal rate. CCDLA supports our assigned counsel members and unanimously agree that an 80% increase in the assigned counsel rate is essential to protect Connecticut residents' constitutional right to counsel, to maintain the integrity of our criminal justice system, to ensure we as a state uphold the Constitution. We must fairly compensate assigned counsel. It's long overdue. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Audrey. Have a nice night. Enjoy
You as
Phil-
well.
Andrew Reynolds. Andrew Reynolds. Got to unmute yourself. Mr. Reynolds, can you hear us?
There we go.
All right,
Sorry about that.
that's all right.
My name is Andy Reynolds, and I am a resident of Wallingford, and I was the uncle of Jessica Short, who was murdered by an escapee. And I wanted to express my support for victims groups and the financial means that they are given. I'm not doing very well at this, but I wanted to say that there are so many victims out there, and I've received help. So many other victims have received help, and I encourage you to support the financial means for those groups, as well as consider increasing them to meet the needs of victims. I'd be happy to answer any questions, but if not, I thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Reynolds. We have no questions at this time, but thank you for your support. Up
Thank
next,
you.
Michelle Voigt. Michelle Voigt. Michelle, you got to unmute yourself.
Good evening, distinguished members of the Appropriations, Judicial, and Corrections Subcommittee. I am Michelle Voigt, co-founder of Violent Crime Survivors. We are not a VOCA-funded agency. 100% of our actions, advocacy, and interventions are at the request of violent crime victims and survivors, including my testimony today. That is in support of the provisions in HB 6659 that allocates funding for victim service providers. This hearing is somewhat indicative of the tragedy of abuse and violence. Tonight, many are voiceless, traumatized, and cannot associate the words or a way to speak their account or shape the weighty thoughts. Most do not have the resources to be here before you to ask for what they need. We rely on dedicated service providers and advocates who are here providing testimony for those whose voices are often swallowed by agony, despair, and fear, rendered powerless at the hands of another. Victims of violence and homicide suffer a broad range of psychological, social, and economical injuries that persist long after physical wounds have faded or the expected grieving period has passed. Intense feelings of anger, fear, isolation, low self-esteem, helplessness, and depression are common reactions. Many victims suffer from post-traumatic stress disorder, including recurrent memories of the incident, sleep disturbances, feelings of alienation, emotional numbing, and other anxiety-related symptoms. Research indicates that 71% of families and friends of homicide victims experience a lifetime of PTSD. Survivors of prolonged repeat trauma often suffer complex PTSD, which makes them particularly vulnerable to repeat harm, both self-inflicted and at the hands of others. The emotional damage and social isolation caused by victimization can be compounded by a lack of support and stigmatization. Crime victims contend with society's tendency to blame them for the crime, which compounds the trauma of the event. The lack of support can exacerbate the psychological harm caused by victimization and make recovery even more difficult. Victims who seek help may feel ignored or re-victimized by the criminal justice process, which traditionally has been more concerned with the rights of the accused than the rights and needs of the victim. When not addressed, the long-term issues victims face become a societal and economic burden. Maintaining the existing services provided is vital. VOCA-funded providers offer an impressive collaborative of crossover approach to victim services. The impact survivors of homicide has had on the profound trauma families experience after the sudden taking of a loved one must be maintained. Without the additional funding proposed, what they accomplish now will be impossible. You've heard from CCADV, so I'll be brief. As intimate partner violence is on the rise and the brutality of intimate partner murder escalating, we must invest more in protecting women and children from abuse, not less. The governor's proposed allocation is essential. Anything less will be detrimental. Thank you. I'm finished. Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you. Have a great night.
You too. Up next is Alden Woodcock. Mr. Woodcock.
Yeah, thank you. Good evening, Senator Austin and members of the committee. My name is Alden Woodcock from New Haven, Connecticut, and I'm the executive director at Emerge Connecticut Incorporated. I want to thank you for the opportunity to testify in regards to HB 06659 concerning the state budget and making appropriations therefore. Emerge is seeking to remain at our current level of support, which has been $500,000 per year in the judicial and corrections budget for fiscal years 24 and 25. For those who don't know, since 2011, Emerge has operated an employment social enterprise based in New Haven for people transitioning home from incarceration. As both a nonprofit and certified home improvement contractor, Emerge is able to offer paid employment on our construction, landscaping, and property maintenance crews while earning a paycheck and building on vocational skill sets. Emerge crew members engage in a series of programs designed to end the pattern of recidivism through peer mentorship, increased access to essential resources, and group curriculums that serve to destigmatize mental health services. Emerge's approach has yielded an 11% cumulative 2-year recidivism rate since 2011, and just 3% of our 2018 cohort returned to prison compared to 20% statewide. In 2021, this committee made an investment in supporting Emerge's results-driven model in the wake of Northern's closing. You knew, as Emerge did at that time, that the reduction of Connecticut's prison population to the lowest it's been since 1990 would have been in vain if there was no support for the people being released. Emerge's impact was felt deeply in New Haven, the county with the highest number of incarcerated residents and the highest incarceration rate in the state. Because of your support in 2021, Emerge was able to meet the demand of the increased number of returning citizens, enrolling and employing 79 in the first 18 months and increasing their access to employment, basic needs, and mental health supports. In the first year, Emerge alumni experienced 82% job retention, and our numbers only continue to grow. With Willard closing this year, Connecticut's reform efforts continue, making it critically important that this committee continue their investment. Emerge is asking for the same level of support, $500,000 per year, to continue the much needed combination of services. With your continued investment, Emerge is now not only positioned to continue making an impact in New Haven, but will also be able to start up operations for the first time in Bridgeport. It is my hope that the investment in the men and women returning home to our communities through Emerge will continue. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. And Mr. Woodcock, do you know if the next 3 Emerge people are coming on? Ronaldo Cruz, Taber Hashim, and Andrew Ramsey, or are you the only speaker from Emerge tonight?
Yeah, actually, I spoke with one of the members of the committee earlier today, and in the interest of the committee's time, we decided to narrow it down to just me tonight. So thank you.
Thank you very much. We appreciate it. Have a nice weekend. Up next is Roberto Virgilia and Hebert Rosario. Are you both here? I know I'm not saying it right, so I'm not even going to try.
I can be Virgilio for tonight and he can be Rob.
Okay, very good. Go ahead, the floor is yours.
Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the committee. My name is Rob Hebert and I'm the Chief Strategic Officer for Career Resources, Inc. out of Bridgeport. I also co-chair the Bridgeport Reentry Collaborative and serve on the Governor's Workforce Council. I had written prepared comments, but I'm going to try to blow through it and save time for Virgilio here, which has a much more important voice than my own. I'm here today to urge the body to this body to end the practice of closing prisons and not reinvesting in the community. Justice reinvestment has been a conversation in Connecticut for some time and has not been realized. Since I've been in the job, I've seen Willard, Enfield, going backwards, Webster, Northern, Gates, and Bergen all close their doors with no money coming into the community to support the programs that help those closures. I'm here today to also ask that the committee in appropriations support the Reentry Welcome Center Network of Connecticut. With the $6.5 million that we're going to save in the Willard closing, we could dedicate $5 million to that network. Without getting into the math, I can guarantee you give me $5 million, I'll give you 18.5 back with the savings due to the drop recidivism rates. That's what I'm going to end with, except to tell you that this is an opportunity. Like my boss said earlier, the time is now. It's a good opportunity. We got to show the state of Connecticut how we can be fiscally and socially responsible and smart on crime.
My name is Virgilia Rosario. I work for Career Resource. I also own a business. I'm here first. Before I begin, I want to thank the committee members that are here and the representatives and senators, because you invest in the opportunity to let people like us, myself, that is and living daily life in society after returning back from term of incarceration, and the needs that, going back to Robin Porter, says that you have to put a human touch to this, right? So funding is a critical point, but know that the people who are really returning back to society have very intense needs, that with these fundings available to agencies like Career Resources that have the people in place and they're growing and they got the metrics, they're getting the information, and they're in pursuit of wanting to invest in this class of people that return back to society that are not being accepted to society by society standards. The hidden hand comes in because of the things they've been through and the things that they face every day. There are many people who recently returned back to society that have attempted, tried hard, and have failed. And it saddens me because the money, people put emphasis on money, but money comes and goes. And if you invest in society's people that need a helping hand just to readjust back to what society, like there's a book in The Meaning of Man where it says that you being in an abnormal environment, being normal in an abnormal environment is abnormal. For a term of incarceration, many men have, because not, and not to take away from victims of crimes or anybody who's been a victim of crime or anything, I understand that. But then there's processes that men in prison go through, such as myself. Like, I probably went into prison as a youth to be just, the conversation for youth wasn't having then. And I was put into grown-up facilities with the most hardened of criminals according to society standards. But I went in as a young kid, and these hardened criminals that were in prison living a certain life instituted in me how to make my bed, how to put my pants up to my waist, how to wash up and bathe and shave and be respectful and read. And nobody ever gave them that credit. That probably, I could have been victimized, but they didn't victimize me. They encouraged me to try to do better for myself and gave me a system that it took me a long time, because I always was stumbling when I get back to society, because I wasn't accepted in society's norms. Society did not. So, not to take no credit for what I don't want to take credit for the things I did or committed, or I did my time for it, and I'm ashamed for it. When you capitalize and become what would you say, a more polished version of yourself, and you start reinvesting in yourself. And I came out to society in 2021, June 15. Ever since then, I took it upon myself to give myself an opportunity to challenge society, and basically go to people and ask for help, in the sense that I've gotten education, I've gotten a great opportunity for a career job, I've started a business, I've created so much business acumen that I didn't have prior to coming back to society. And there is many great people in society that have encouraged me. And now, as I prove myself, and not to nobody, but most to myself or to my family, right? That I can be equitable and comparative, like in everything, there's a comparative advantage. We don't have a comparative advantage. So there's no equilibrium for people coming out of prison. And that's just an economic, Adam Smith said that, a man that this is like one of the father of economics. He says, if man does not be given an opportunity to have equitable wealth, he'll be poor and beggar. So with that, I terminate this and say that, I urge the governor to take a humanistic approach of the reentry sector of our society. And thank you for that. With that, I pass.
Thank you. And I know that your brother wants to say something to you, Mr. Rosario.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good evening, Rob, and good evening, Virgilio. First of all, before I ask, I have one question for each and every one of you, but Mom and Dad will be very proud of you and all the work that you've done, and I love you.
Thank you.
Rob, what other states currently have a justice reinvestment fund? And as far, and Virgilio, how has an organization, I know you touched upon it, how has CRI helped you reenter into society?
Well, I believe, oddly enough, Arkansas, and I know we like to feel like we're very progressive in Connecticut. In many ways we are, but there's a lot of states that really have their act together in a lot of ways more than us, unfortunately. There's an ID issue that you're aware of. Ohio seems to have licked that pretty quick and pretty easy at no cost. We still struggle with it. Justice reinvestment has been the conversation since before Governor Lamont came in. You know, brought the new undersecretary in from the justice reinvestment sector of the Council of State Governments. Still nothing. So I think it's really time. I think it's really time. I don't know how many more prisons are going to close. I hope they all close. You know, I don't think that's probably going to happen, but I can't see another one closing in the near future. So this $6.5 million opportunity that we have to really double down and get a return on investment is, we cannot squander it. I've been doing this stuff for 25 years, you know, and I've been wanted to see a big opportunity to really take hold of this. And it would be such a disappointment and a letdown for so many people if we don't do this. Because like Scott said earlier, this time next year, the 1,000 people that are depending on the Reentry Welcome Center network are going to end up on the street, period. There's no state funding. It's all ARPA dollars and some foundation funds, and they're gone.
I participate and I joined Career Resource for the simple reason that I believe that they are a well-prepared group to tackle this this nuisance problem that we have in our society, right? So what I also want to say is that if you don't invest in the most critical part of our society, but you invest it to verifiable fact, incarcerate mass amount of men from my community, like 100 children, 100 young men getting arrested, picked up. They were hard on crime. They were funding these methods of incarcerating men at large numbers, right? And it's so difficult to ask for help, to get funding, to fix men that are even returning. Just as a year and a half ago, some of these men were victims of COVID in prison, men dying in prison. Men are coming back. People are forgetting that I wrote a letter saying goodbye to my family because I didn't know. So people tend to take the human part, like Ms. Porter said, out of this equation. This is not a need for me to sit up here like claiming to beg for money to try to help a need that we all know exists. We all know that mass incarceration by Michelle Alexander's, many studies, you can go back to a lot of Soledad brothers, a lot of Malcolm X, you can go into Mandela, right? And we could speak about that, but why is it so difficult to, if we know there's a problem and a funding problem, give the money to the right people to fix this problem that we have in our society that nobody's listening to. So the results are just tragedies. Young men dying, young men dropping out of schools, young men going to prison for the rest of their life, not realizing that 10 years into their life, their hair start getting gray. Now they don't even know how to function in a society again because they still stuck. So if they go to prison when they're 17 and they get out when they're 28, now you have a 20-year-old, 17-year-old out in society.
Thank you. You've done a great job. We're really proud of you. Thank you.
That's it.
Thank you. Next, we will have Mary Foster, Mary Jane Foster, I'm sorry, followed by Aaron Carpenter.
Good evening. Madam Chair, distinguished members of the committee, thank you for this hearing. Thank you for hearing all of these voices. I am here as the president and CEO of Interval House, one of CCADV's 18 member agencies. But first I have to give a shout out to Career Resources, where I was a board member for 6 years. I love the work that they do. They are extraordinary. I'm very, very proud of the years that I served there. And so here's to you guys. Hi and thanks. I also want to give a thanks to this committee and to the legislature and to the governor for the support that we were given last year in this VOCA funding mess, which, as we all know, is an issue of the federal government and not the state government. Victims of violent crimes have been left with a significant gap in funding. It is acute for everyone, whether it's survivors of homicide or at CCADV and us agencies like Interval House. Interval House, if you don't know, is Connecticut's largest domestic violence agency. We serve Hartford and the surrounding 23 towns. And we're the largest because it's the largest geographic area. We work with the largest number of victims. Just so you know, pre-COVID, we worked with about 4,500 victims of domestic violence every year. The pandemic has caused such chaos in family violence that last year we worked with 6,800 victims. That's about a 33% increase. And we have done it with the exact same number of advocates. We don't have the money for an increase in staff. So at the thought of losing any amount of VOCA funding, we really are looking at layoffs. That's what it is. Of those 6,800 victims, by the way, we served almost 4,600 of those 6,800 victims in the courts. And I have 8 advocates. Interval House has 8 advocates who are essentially fully funded by VOCA to do this work. It is life-saving work. If it's about 25% of my budget. If it were cut by 50%, which is what we're looking at with a gap, I would have to lay people off. And that would diminish the number of victims we could serve. Those are the cold, hard facts, period. I can't, people know me as someone who is not shy about asking for funding and donations, but I can't raise that amount of money. I will have to lay off. I will have to cut services. I will have to do that. So I'm incredibly, profoundly grateful for the commitment to fund fiscal year 24, but we need a commitment for 25 for all victims of violent crime. That's a $20 million number. This is the year to do it. And I'm asking you to do it.
Thank you. If you could please give your final comments, your time is up. Thank you.
I will do that. I got into this business because I have seen how it changes, not only saves, but changes lives. And we have an opportunity to do that each and every day. It's a privilege. And I hope that you will vote to continue our funding to do just that. Thank you so much and have a great night.
Thank you so much. Next, we have Aaron Carpenter. Followed by Kevin DeVary.
Hello, everyone. Hi, my name is Aaron. Thank you for your time. I'm actually here in 2 different capacities. I'm here because I'm a victim of crimes case manager for Catholic Charities and CCFSA. I'm also here because I'm a homicide survivor. About 12 years ago, I survived getting shot. I was shot twice in my neck, twice in my arms, and twice in my chest. I am okay. I'm physically A-okay. But mentally, I was a wreck. The first time in my entire life I had received any mental health services was through OVS, because there's a provision in OVS that allows you, if you're a victim of a crime, to receive mental health services. to not mince words, that first bit of therapy is probably what saved my life. The person that was up here earlier said that it's abnormal to feel normal in an abnormal situation. And that's where my headspace was, because I was never surprised when I was shot. It happens a lot where I'm from. And as a victim of crime case manager, the thing that always strikes me about my clients is that's the environment they're coming from. And they're not all homicide survivors. A lot of them are. The difference between their situation and mine is it's their significant other that victimized them. When we're going through stuff, when any of us are going through difficult situations, we reach out to our significant other for love, support, comfort, a hug. Instead, they got the back of their hands, emotional abuse, physical neglect, sometimes pistol whipped or shot. Most of my clients have survived these instances. This is why I'm able to work with them in a professional capacity. But please put yourself, when we're discussing increasing the budget or decreasing the budget, please put yourself in their shoes and imagine what that would feel like. The people you reach out to for support are the people striking you. And the craziest thing about this is it's all very common. It would not surprise me if even in this room, there are people that have dealt with domestic violence in their homes, but they're not in a position where they can talk about it. It is very, very common, which is kind of why I'm glad for the program I work for. I've connected victims to victims advocate. I've connected them to police officers when they are scared to talk to the police. They see what happens in the news, they see what happens in other states, and they are petrified of talking to the police. I go with them to file these police reports. I've helped them get in contact with mental health services. We do a lot with our victims to connect them to the services that they need, and it makes a difference. Please keep this in mind when trying to figure out whether we increase or decrease the budget.
Thank you so very much for that. Thank you.
No worries. Thanks.
Kevin DeVary.
Good evening, Appropriations Committee. My name is Kevin DeVary. I'm a resident of Hartford, and I'm a state school teacher in Unified School District Number 1 in the Department of Correction. I want to give you my following testimony. A properly funded state budget is necessary to ensure the services provided by myself and my fellow state employees deliver effective and efficient services. When we are given the resources and support we need, state employees do it better, faster, and for less than anyone else. I am a teacher at Manson Youth Institution and a member of the Professional Development Committee for Unified School District Number 1. I teach English as a second language. I work my hardest to integrate non-English speakers into a state and country where English is the dominant language so that they can be successful and lawfully participate in society. Unfortunately, our school has been chronically short-staffed. We haven't had a librarian for more than a year, so students can't utilize our library. Our second gym teacher retired more than 2 years ago, so now only under 18-year-olds have gym class. We need a full complement of teachers, including special education teachers, reentry counselors, art teachers, secretary, a world language teacher. We need more certified and non-certified staff to have a fully operational school district, let alone the directors to be hired for a school administration. With a record surplus and an overflowing rainy day fund, there is no reason for my students to be shortchanged. The funding USD1 has been receiving is not enough. It doesn't support the neediest group of students in our state or the educators like myself who are in the classroom with them. In a year when legislators are talking about increasing education funding, USD1 must be part of that discussion. I urge you to appropriate additional funding for the schools and educational programs in DOC, as well as make USD1 a line item in the state budget. I'm proud to work for the people of Connecticut and ask that you craft a budget that makes the needed investments in public services, the people who provide them, as well as the people who rely on them. Thank you.
Thank you so very much. Have a good evening. Next, Alexandra Angeloro, followed by Jess Zagadnino.
Hi, good evening. Thank you so much for having me here. I'd first like to start off by saying that my name is Alexandra Angeloro and that I am a survivor of domestic violence. And there's a lot of power in even saying that. So I'm going to say it again, that I am a survivor, no longer a victim. And the reason why is because of all of the amazing programs that I have been able to take part in. The Center for Family Justice, they definitely saved me and my son. I'd like to explain what a 50% reduction to VOCA funding would mean for survivors such as myself. And I'd also like for everyone to just take a moment and think about all of the victims who haven't had the chance to even get to that place where they haven't found that safe haven, where they haven't discovered that there is help out there and there's wonderful people and organizations that can help all of us to get to the place where we need to be so we are financially independent. If these cuts were made, there would be a huge impact, not just on us as individuals, but as a community as a whole. And being in Bridgeport, I see it all the time. I personally had a conversation the other day with someone that I work with, and she blatantly said, like, I will not leave him because this is the first time in my life that I'm actually stable. For me personally, it's been 2 years now since I've been able to live free with my son from our abuser and safely in a home. I don't have to worry about somebody coming in and having my son go through what we went through before. And unfortunately, domestic violence has been a cycle for us over the past couple of years. So I take a lot of pride in saying that after 4 times of leaving my abuser that I finally left, and thanks to the Center for Family Justice, I was able to stay away. When I needed support in the courts, my advocate, when I was there shaking because I suffer from PTSD, just even being in a room with him, it was so intimidating that I could barely even speak, that she was right there. And Danielle has absolutely been my motivator and has on a walk-in basis when I just need that pep talk and tell me like, you're doing great. And for people like me that you never hear that, that's not something that you're used to actually have that is wonderful. My son and I, we do counseling there. They've helped with connecting us to LifeBridge so he can have ongoing support. Because to be honest with you, since I've been out of the domestic violence for 2 years now, it kind of just evolves. It never goes away. And these bruises, you don't see them. So I'd like to say thank you so much for taking this time to listen to our testimony and to really just take into consideration that if it wasn't for the fact that we had these support systems, although I am working and I'm able to support my son on my own, that I didn't have a backpack for him, school supplies, Christmas presents under the tree, and just basic necessities. Like, I struggle with that, and I work, and I don't have the support of food assistance because I'm working and I'm making too much. And because of places like the Center for Family Justice, we're able to go there and utilize their pantry. Also, if my son is having anxiety or anything, I can literally take him and make a phone call and he could go in, and this is all free of charge to us. So, it's not just about helping us as the adults. We're also trying to break the cycle, the intergenerational cycles of abuse, and help.
Thank you so much. I'm sorry to interrupt.
No, that's okay.
Your time is up, but thank you so much for your testimony.
Yes, thank you.
Have a good evening.
You too.
Next, we'll have Jess Zaccanino. Pardon me if I mispronounced that.
All right, pretty close. Senator Austin, Representative Walker, ranking members Berthel and Nuccio, and distinguished members of the Appropriation Committee. My name is Jess Zaccanino, and I'm the Policy Counsel of the American Civil Liberties Union of Connecticut. I'm here to testify on House Bill 6659, an act concerning the state budget for the biennium ending June 30th, 2025. The ACLU is an organization dedicated to ending mass incarceration and the disparate effects of mass incarceration on Black and Brown Connecticut residents. One of the best uses of funds in Connecticut is to divest from policing and incarceration and reallocate those funds back into people and communities harmed by a systematically racist system of mass incarceration. Justice reinvestment represents a change in how we define public safety. It means investing in education, healthcare, and Connecticut's peoples and community to keep our people and communities safe. Moving money that formerly propped up symbols of mass incarceration, like the money spent on Willard and Northern correctional institutions, into the people who experience those harms is not just good policy, but a strong message about Connecticut's priorities. Our state has a substantial surplus in rainy day fund, and the closure of these prisons will net even more savings for the state. The money saved from these prisons closures would go into programs and services run by and for incarcerated and formerly incarcerated people, namely educational programming, reentry services, creating a DOC healthcare advisory board or oversight board, and healthcare staff. These reentry funds should include providing a state ID to every person as they leave incarceration. We have a moral and legal obligation to provide care for those whom the state has chosen to incarcerate. The state is spending a great deal of money trying to defend its indefensible choice to not provide adequate health care for incarcerated people. Rather than spend money defending lawsuits, the state should spend money providing that care. We know that a person released from incarceration is more likely to die within the first 2 weeks of their return to community. We know that when we provide a proper transition of care, one that includes the involvement of formerly incarcerated community health workers, we can keep folks alive and healthy. The Justice Reinvestment Package is based on proven efforts that have been successful in other jurisdictions. The principle behind it, the more we care for those who the state has chosen to incarcerate, the healthier people are when they return to community. The Justice Reinvestment Coalition is calling for increases of $30 million to address the DOC healthcare staff shortages, $20 million to improve incarcerated people's medical services, $5 million to train and recruit formerly incarcerated people to work in healthcare and reentry, funding and creating a regulatory oversight body over DOC healthcare, growing effective reentry strategies through education, training, and discharge programs, and fully funding Unified School District Number 1. As a whole, the ACLU supports a budget that divests from policing, the criminal legal system, and the carceral system. Please refer to my written testimony for expanded comments. We emphatically encourage this committee to reinvest this money, in addition to funds from our astronomical surplus and rainy day fund, into reentry services, healthcare and oversight, defense representation, and all other policies recommended in this testimony. Thank you and have a good night.
Thank you so much. We really appreciate your testimony. Next is Marie Kenny. Marie Kenny.
Hello. Good evening, Madam Chair and distinguished members of the committee. Safe Futures is a CCADV member agency, and we provide life-saving and life-changing services to victims of domestic violence in southeastern Connecticut. Last year, our VOCA-funded court advocates supported victims through 35% of all the criminal cases in New London County. We worked with more than 5,000 individuals. These cases are incredibly complex, and as you all know, the outcomes can turn deadly. Since the COVID epidemic, we're seeing more cases, and the cases involve much more severe forms of violence. Our advocates support and guide victims through a complicated and overwhelming court system. We give victims a voice where they might otherwise struggle to be heard. As an example, a fairly typical case, an advocate was working with a victim where the defendant was now on his third arraignment. And as a result of the previous incidents, the court had already placed this defendant on an IPS GPS bracelet. At the time of this new arraignment, the victim was worried that the defendant would file a motion to remove the IPS GPS bracelet and relayed her concerns to the advocate. The advocate brought the victim's concerns to the state's attorney's office, and at arraignment, the defendant did in fact file a motion to have the bracelet removed, but the prosecutor was able to effectively object to the motion because of the information relayed by the advocate. As the case progressed, the advocate and the prosecutor continued to meet frequently, and the advocate kept the victim informed of all the developments in the case. The advocate also arranged for a meeting between the victim and the prosecutor. And because of this, the victim felt trust in the prosecutor and in the system, and the prosecutor gained helpful information about the case. Due to reassignments, though, this original prosecutor was removed from the case, and the victim was now worried that the case would be handled differently. So the advocate set up a meeting with the victim and the new prosecutor, where this prosecutor discussed their analysis of the case and how they expected to proceed. The victim left feeling that her rights as a victim were being advocated for thoroughly. And it was the Safe Futures advocate, the VOCA funded advocate, who was the vital link in helping the victim maintain trust in the system. I ask all of you on this committee to recognize the value of the work that these VOCA funded advocates provide. We simply cannot manage the caseloads we are seeing with a 50% cut in funding for advocates and the resulting reduction of our staff. We cannot fill the gap in funds and would need to let staff go. I urge you to allocate funding in both fiscal year 24 and 25 to ensure that these essential VOCA funded victim services remain in place. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much. Have a good evening. Next is Michael Howard, followed by Chris Oakley.
Hello, and good evening, esteemed members of the Appropriation Committee. My name is Michael Howard. I'm here to speak to you tonight in support of creating a Justice Reinvestment Fund with the DOC budget funds recently that became available from the closing of Willard CI. I strongly believe that these funds would be put to their best use through investment in the reentry establishment and sector, which seeks to reduce recidivism and future crime, ultimately resulting in safer communities through data-driven practices and innovative forms of support for the reentry population, such as as mental health, addiction support, and general navigation assistance for returning citizens. I have personally and am still receiving assistance through Career Resources, one such reentry-based organization with employment assistance in the form of soft skills reintegration and training through the STRIVE program, as well as hard skills training and certification and employment assistance through the workplace and entry point staffing, without whose help I would be up against great odds. Not to mention programs I've been involved in to help further my work on a journey to better get to know myself and understand the things that led me to be incarcerated in the first place. Places like J Brothers and Homebridge. With life rehabilitation services offered by reentry entities such as Career Resources and their programs like the Welcome Center, men and women can receive assistance they need to ensure safe and successful reintegration into the community, along with the assistance they so desperately need to ensure that they have a fair chance at becoming responsible, contributing members of society who hold themselves accountable for the happiness and success of not only themselves, but their loved ones. Recidivism rates have always been high because people who have been incarcerated would just be released back into their communities with no real support or services, which resulted in rates probably upwards. I believe last year it was about 34% of people who were incarcerated returning back to the same activities that led them to be involved in the justice system in the first place, because with little or no options, they went back to the only life they knew. The Welcome Center, having been open since April 2022, has succeeded in reducing the recidivism of their clients to a meager 2%, which is amazing compared to the monstrous rates of recidivism that preceded it. The main goal of this committee, as I understand it, is to ensure the most appropriate use of the funds left in the corrections budget from the closing of Willard CI. It is my heartfelt belief that the state of Connecticut would best be served by reallocating the funds to the Justice Reinvestment Fund to assist the reentry establishment in ensuring the best possible outcomes for the communities it serves. By this action, the committee will be creating the best possible outcome for the entire state by reducing recidivism as well as overall crime rates in 2023 and beyond. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for your testimony. Have a good evening. Next is Daniel Horgan.
Thank you, distinguished members of the committee. My name is Dan Horgan. I'm the president of the Connecticut Bar Association, the premier bar association in the state of Connecticut with over 8,800 members in a state that has roughly 22,000 registered lawyers. We ask for your consideration and full support of increased funding for private assigned counsel for indigent adult defendants and increased funding for assigned counsel for indigent juvenile court defendants. In the case representing indigent adults, assigned counsel or special public defenders receive only $75 per hour, an amount that has not been increased in over 16 years. An increase to $135 an hour would be more in line with our federal court pay and what our neighboring states pay assigned counsel. In the case of our assigned juvenile court lawyers, a reevaluation and an adjustment from the current $500 cap for cases and sometimes $65 per hour for certain activities is desperately needed to save a system that is seeing less lawyers and an increase in juvenile arrests across the state. Friends, what is more important than protecting the constitutional rights to fairness and due process for our most vulnerable citizens, poor defendants facing prosecution? But this isn't just about fair and equitable pay for the selfless lawyers that take on these cases. This is an access to justice problem for our citizens. We already know the alarming statistics that face our family and housing courts, with over 70% of all litigants not represented by an attorney. In our criminal justice system, those statistics are masked or blurred by the extremely good work our public defenders do across the state. But with increasing caseloads, they are beyond stretched to the max to perform their jobs. They rely heavily on the cavalry, the assigned counsel. The majority of assigned counsel comes from solo or small law firms. They love what they do, but they have staff, rents, utilities, and malpractice insurance. How can they continue to do this important work on $65 or $75 per hour? Talk to your colleagues, many of whom are practicing attorneys who know firsthand how difficult it is to take on these cases at such low pay. And like you all, when you leave this building and take your legislator hats off, the serious issues you debate and decide on weigh heavily on your minds for a long time. The same is true for assigned counsels who often deal with serious criminal matters that have an emotional consequence not easily shaken when the case gets put back into the cabinet. I know the CBA can muster more support from its members to volunteer in these assigned cases in both arenas, but we need to give them incentives to do so. A competitive, fair wage. We have provided fair increases to judges and legislators in the last 2 years, and it's time for treating assigned lawyers fairly. I drove up here from New London because it was important to address this body in person. It was the right thing to do for the Bar Association. When I leave in a few minutes, I intend to drive 3 hours to upstate New York and visit my 90-year-old mother. That is the right thing to do when you are blessed to have an elderly parent. I'm confident when it's all said and done that you will support the increases asked because you know it is the right thing to do. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Next, we'll have Chris Oakley, followed by Olivia Rinks.
Thank you, Madam Chair, Vice Chairs, distinguished members of the committee, senators, representatives. I am a solo practitioner at this time. I am a member of the CBA Child Welfare Juvenile Law section, and I am the legislative liaison. I did submit some written testimony on this subject, and I want to say again, to start, thank you to listening to this subject. I'll say we've actually had a pretty good turnout of people coming forward, attorneys, to raise this issue with you tonight. But I'll tell you, there was some reluctance, there's shyness. The thought being, well, you're just going to be a bunch of attorneys going in asking for money. Who's going to buy into this? And so the thing we have to beat over our own attorneys' heads is you're doing this for the clients. You're doing this for the families. You're doing this for the children. I mainly represent juvenile minors is the bulk of my practice. And what I mean by that is this, and this is what you've already heard. At the very beginning of my practice was 2006. At my height, I worked up to 4 attorneys working with me. I was hiring a 5th. I had 2 full-time paralegals. Since 2006, I've been appointed, my firm has been appointed to 3,500 cases, over half being children. During that period of time, we spent a lot of time on the cases. We worked the cases. My own personal story is the start of COVID and during COVID, 2 of my attorneys went to the Attorney General's office. One went to a law firm that only does family law. Another went to another firm that does other practice. One did decide to start a solo practice and still does the same work, but it's the same thing you've seen over and over again. Attorneys are flooding out of this field, going to more lucrative areas because they've got to make the best decisions for them and their families. The judges are also under pressure. They're having less attorneys there. And my grandfather used to give an adage, good work begots more work, which begots poor work. And so you have the attorneys that are remaining in this field, and the judges are expecting them to be there more available, spend more time on these cases because they need it and it's important. But you're driving people, and I don't mean you as the committee, but the situation, it's really difficult for people to remain and do this work. So I'm happy to see we had over 20 people submit testimony. And I'm willing to bet they're members of this committee. If it was up to their own devices, we would have never gotten into this position to begin with. I'm hoping there's enough political will to push this forward. And I'm going to end on this point. I represent a child, and I frankly stopped taking cases in September 2021. One of the kids I represent witnessed a murder in front of it, and that child's now in DCF care. I continue to do this for those clients. So thank you for your consideration.
Thank you so much. Next, we'll have Olivia Rinks. Followed by Alicia Strong.
Thank you. And thank you to the Appropriations Committee for the opportunity to comment on the 2024-2025 budget on the topic of funding for Corrections Department and Judicial Services. My name is Olivia Rinkus from the town of North Stonington. I'm also a student at the University of Connecticut. I would like to echo some of the other testimonies this evening that urge legislators to make a stronger commitment in this budget to reinvesting the savings for the closing of Willard Cebulski Prison Facility in communities and reentry services. Connecticut has already closed 2 other prisons, and the closing of Willard will save the state an estimated $6.5 million. I strongly support this move away from a punitive criminal justice system towards more preventative resources. To achieve this, these savings can be meaningfully invested in community resources that will help individuals who are reentering society. As others have pointed out, formerly incarcerated individuals are reentering society with a number of barriers that affect their ability to find meaningful employment and safe, stable housing. These barriers increase the likelihood that someone will reoffend and decrease overall quality of life. A driver's license or some form of identification is an extremely important resource that should be made available to everyone who is exiting a correctional facility. Without identification, the ability to find employment and housing is extremely reduced, and the process of obtaining identification can be a costly and time-consuming process. Housing is another important resource that would benefit from resources saved by closing Willard. People being released from incarceration need shelter. Shelter is a human right. Not everyone is fortunate enough to have family or friends or other resources that help them to find stable housing immediately upon release. Investment in affordable, stable housing services is crucial to keeping recidivism down. Medical care is also an important resource, that would benefit from an increase in funding from the savings from closing Willard. Medical care is a human right, and health needs don't end when an individual becomes incarcerated, including dental and mental health needs. We need to ensure that medical services for individuals who are incarcerated are fully funded. Many individuals can also speak to the medical or mental health traumas that they experience while incarcerated that continue to require treatment after release. Therefore, medical services should include individuals who are paroled or discharged. Other areas of the corrections benefit that might benefit from additional funding from the closing of Willard facility would be legal services. Not everyone might need this, but legal representation is a civil right, and we need to ensure that this is adequately funded to represent all individuals who need it. Thank you again for the opportunity to comment. Reentry services need to be a priority for reducing recidivism. Rather than putting more funding into increasing staffing numbers and the carceral system when prisons are being closed, and prison populations in the state are dropping, we need to be providing aid to individuals who are re-entering. Putting money from these prison closings into re-entry services and back into underfunded communities will take steps to begin addressing the damages that neglect and institutionalized racism have created and continue to compound. All communities in Connecticut should have access to housing, education, food, healthcare, including dental and mental health care and public transport.
Wrap up your
Thank you.
comments. Thank you so much. Have a good evening.
And now I guess I'll move from here. Edgardo Reyes.
There we go. Look at it now.
Good evening, members of the Appropriation Committee. First and foremost, I want to be able to express my gratitude for allowing us to be here today. I want to be able to take a brief moment to allow one of our Bridgeport Reentry Welcome Center clients to give a brief minute and a half. I want to be kind enough, compassionately, to be able to give him a minute and a half, if that's possible.
Please proceed. Just identify yourself. Thank you.
My name is Jermaine Little. I did 17 years in prison, been home for 4 years. And throughout those 4 years, I was struggling. Very, very bad, struggling. And the past 2 years, 2.5 years, I met this guy named Rob. He's the one that runs the Bridgeport Reentry Center. And I met him through seeing him on this program, doing it local. You know, I was working for a $13 an hour job. When I met him, he got me an $18 an hour job. And we've been struggling, like, far as the funding go, we've been struggling to help me. I can't speak for everybody else, but helping me. And say about 2 years, finally got me an opportunity to get my own apartment. I want to praise him for that. I'll be moving in Wednesday, hopefully. But that and I just want to speak about y'all cutting the funding or not giving them the funding, because they said next year they might not be here to help us. And hopefully my testimony can help them, help y'all help them. Like I said, I did 17 years straight in prison, and I've been out here struggling. But thanks to him and his program, I'm doing good now. And hopefully y'all can help them, help me, or people like me too. Thank you.
Thank you, Jermaine. And just to briefly add, I know I have a small minute here. The Bridgeport Reentry Welcome Center opened on April 25th, 2022. Since then, we have had 191 returning citizens walking through our doors. And I want to remind everyone that we're a voluntary program. The Welcome Centers are not a mandated program. And I get emotional, and the human touch is really important here, because the Welcome Centers have the ability, and we're blessed, should I say, that we're the first point of contact for individuals coming out from incarceration. And I myself, being on the front line, I'm a clinical navigator. My role fast track is individuals come out from incarceration, they see Edgardo Reyes and our team at the Reentry Center, assess requested services, and we hit the ground running wide awake. So that first encounter at the Welcome Center could make or break a situation, and we provide hope. And I'm very passionate about what I do. I have 18 years of case management experience, substance abuse outpatient organization I work for called Recovery Network of Programs. I'm blessed enough to be a part of 2 organizations, what I say, that are gurus in the game, if you will, who has the opportunity to come from incarceration on day one. And I get passionate about this, and get the immediate services on day one that they are in need of, from employment to education, mental health services, substance abuse services. I mean, on day one, we're what we call as a one-stop shop welcome center. And Jermaine is not alone. We have many individuals that I've seen at their worst coming out. And I get emotional because I've seen grown men and grown women walk through our welcome center and cry and say, Ed, if it wasn't for the welcome center, I'd probably be like Shawshank Redemption and not have a choice but to go back and call that home. So with that being said, $92,000, my figures might be off, but $92,000 a year, perhaps, to house an inmate. Let's just give a simple number of 100. Don't know what those figures are. If the welcome centers had a fraction of that amount, I am 150% confident that we are able to assist individuals like Jermaine with the appropriate resources if we had just a fraction of additional funding. I myself know that I'm wired in the sense of I want everybody to win. Every single individual that has come through the Welcome Center will sit there and tell you that they have received nothing but top-notch service. And that's not for the sake of numbers. That's for the sake of passion and wanting individuals to win. And I think Jermaine can attest that. And we have a whole crew behind us from the Welcome Center that I'm sure will share their personal stories. So with that being said, I'm just hopeful out loud that we can put some funding into the Welcome Centers, because that's the best ROI. So Mr. Robert Hebert spoke of, that's going to help these individuals put their best foot forward
Thank you.
and
We
be
got it.
productive members of society.
We got
Thank you
it.
so much.
Thanks. Yep,
Thanks.
thank you.
Thank you.
Alicia Strong.
Hello. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. First and foremost, thank you to all the members of this committee for listening and being open to all of this testimony. I'm here to testify in support of justice reinvestment with the closure of Willard towards reentry services. I am the director of New Britain Racial Justice Coalition. I am somebody who's lived in New Britain my whole life, and I am also somebody with friends, family members, and people in my community who have experienced incarceration, including some of our own members of New Britain Racial Justice Coalition. So we are keenly aware of every struggle that folks face. As soon as they get out of incarceration, it's like a battle. It's a battle to find housing that will accept you. It's a battle to find jobs that will actually hire you. It's a battle to be able to get the mental health treatment or rehabilitation treatment you might need. So this money is essential. I remember meeting people in New Britain who literally just got out of jail not a day ago with nothing, almost nothing to their name, no place to go because they don't have any family. So reentry funding could be really transformative to so many people. And additionally, it really reduces recidivism. It increases the likelihood that they'll become a participating member of our community and our society and contribute in positive ways. So I urge this committee to use the closure of Willard as an opportunity to make that funding. Second, I also want to urge funding for DOC healthcare to support incarcerated folks. We have a number of people we work with who are still in prison and a number of people who've recently got out, and the stories are just terrifying and horrendous. Getting their teeth pulled for no reason other than there's no better dental care, having infections, having things go untreated for so long that they become even more severe by the time they get out. I hear these stories time and time again. I don't think there's one person I can ask who can confidently tell me that they've received adequate health care to support themselves while in DOC custody. So the funding for healthcare, I think, should be a huge priority, especially mental health care, which is key to helping people transition back into our community. So thank you again for giving me the time to speak today. If you take anything away from what I said, please think about those coming out and how they can rebuild their life and start to give back to the community. Because a lot of the people we work with are dying to give back. They're dying to do the right thing. They just need those resources to be able to do it. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for your testimony. Next up, we have Anthony Small. Madam Chair, he's not here. Was he?
Yes.
Yep. Go ahead, Anthony.
Anthony, yeah, go ahead, please.
Can you see me?
We can't see you, but go ahead.
Go ahead, Anthony.
You muted yourself. Go to the next person.
So let's go to the next person. We have Leslie Spence.
Hello?
So Anthony, we're moving on to Leslie Spence. We'll call on you in a minute.
Good evening. Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Please proceed.
Okay, thank you. Good evening, esteemed members of the committee. Thank you for holding this hearing, as well as the opportunity for me to present my testimony. My name is Leslie Spence, and I am an MSW student with a concentration in policy practice at the University of Connecticut. The United States incarcerated population has disproportionate numbers related to those with past or current mental health disorders, and Connecticut is not immune. As a result, jails and prisons are not equipped to provide adequate mental health for this population. The Judiciary Committee has raised a bill related to addressing the mental health of the incarcerated population through utilization of the general fund. The incarcerated population is in need of mental health services. However, I would propose reallocating or more so reinvesting the funds from the anticipated closure of Willard in April 2023 to address and support the needs of the incarcerated mental health population. Reinvesting these funds would support mental health and healthcare programs within the Department of Corrections to include the ability to secure appropriate services and staff. In addition, if the funds from closing Willard are reinvested within the DOC to aid in mental health support and services, the general fund could be used to increase community resources designed to address mental health and factors that contribute and exacerbate mental health, such as affordable housing, jobs, and healthcare, and also as a result, decrease incarceration and recidivism. Individuals with mental health include disenfranchised populations such as the Brown and Black community, whom are statistically predisposed to mental health due to historical and current disenfranchisement, as well as disproportionate incarceration. This proves no different for Connecticut. In Connecticut, there are 6 cities that are home to more than 50% of the state's incarcerated population. These cities are predominantly Black and Brown communities and would benefit from additional resources to help address factors that create a higher likelihood of incarceration. As previously noted, funding from the general fund can be utilized in the community to include community providers. This would help create a mental health infrastructure in Connecticut designed to aid in treating mental health, to include factors that contribute, again, and exacerbate mental health and increase the likelihood of incarceration, such as access to basic needs, to include housing, food, and support. This will also likely decrease the recidivism related to these factors and positively impact the state's budget. Again, thank you for your opportunity and for hearing my testimony.
Thank you. Thank you for your testimony. Next up, Anthony Small.
Yes, can you hear me?
I can hear you, Anthony. Please proceed.
Anthony Small, and I was incarcerated 28 years and 7 months. When I came home, I had family support, but I also needed to utilize the programs. So I'm in support of the Department of Corrections closing Willard and the funds being advocated towards reentry. And there was a lot of arguments made here today about where the money should go. But I want to give you an example of why Career Resources, the Welcoming Center, as well as Family Reentry should get some of these funds allocated towards them. I'm in CDL school now because of Career Resources. The program cost $5,000 when I was going to register 3 months ago, but I had to obtain my CDL permit. Once I obtained my CDL permit, the price went up because this is a new year. It went up to $6,000. So I had to utilize 2 programs. Although Career Resources paid the majority of the fee, up to $5,000, the fee was changed and it was higher. So I had another $1,200 that I had to come up with. I had to go to another program, Family Reentry, and they paid the $1,200. So that's just a real live example of why these funds should be given to the reentry programs. Once you pay your debt to society and you work on your civility and you come back into the community, you're coming back to be a taxpaying citizen, but you're gonna need help. Only an individual who is in denial would think he's not gonna need help after doing 28 years, 17 years, 10 years, or even 1 year. So there are a lot of programs that can make a good argument for this money. The Public Defender's Office, I heard them speaking, and they represent indigent inmates. But after they represent these inmates, they're going to be released. And when they come into society, we're trying to be a civilian and advance our civility. And the only way we can do this is through programs, helping us, giving us a driveway to pull up in, to be able to enter and negotiate in a business aspect, whether we need an ID, social security number, food stamps, a place to stay, medical, insurance. And this is what Career Resources, as well as Family Reentry, has provided me with. And now I'm a motivational speaker. I just spoke at Tunxus Community College. I just spoke at Burtis Magnus College. I spoke at the Career Resource Press Conference. And I believe that I could do a lot of good for the community, because that's what I want to do, is give back to my community. And to give back to my community, I have to be prepared. And now I'm prepared by using the resources that are available to me. But if there's no money, then that hinders them. Yes?
Yeah, your 2
Hello?
minutes are up. If you can summarize your testimony.
So just to summarize it, I thank the committee, I thank Career Resources, I thank Family Reentry, and I'm just saying that there should be some of this money from Department of Corrections given to them, the DOT, because they're doing a fantastic job, and I'm the evidence of the proof that these reentry programs work. And I thank you for your time.
No, thank you. Thank you for taking the time to testify. Keep up the great work.
Thank you.
Next up, we have Cameron Kessler.
Hi, good evening, esteemed members of the Appropriations Committee. Thank you for this opportunity to testify on behalf of the governor's budget for the Department of Correction. My name is Cameron Kessler. I am the Senior Development Manager at the Cattell Center for Equity, Health, and Justice, and I am a student at the UConn School of Social Work. There is a mental health crisis in the prisons in Connecticut. The percent of those incarcerated who need a high level of mental health care is over 30%, the highest it's ever been in the state, and yet nothing has been done to address this. While Connecticut continues to close prisons, with Radgowski and Northern closing in 2021 and Willard set to close this April, we continue to raise the budget of personnel services, even though fewer employees are needed. The closing of Willard alone will save the state $6.5 million. None of these savings, however, are going into mental health care or health care at all. While personnel services are being raised $7 million in this budget, medical services overall are being raised less than $1 million. I'm aware that a bill has been proposed in the Judiciary Committee to use money from the general fund to invest in mental health care for incarcerated people. But in light of the surplus that closing Willard will create, the legislator should instead directly reinvest these excess funds from closing Willard and Radgowski and Northern into mental health care. The money in the general fund, which is in the billions of dollars, can then be used in mental health services in our community. Many people with mental health diagnoses find themselves incarcerated due to lack of supportive services in their community. When communities do not have resources to treat mental health crises in their members, and these mental illnesses go untreated, the people affected by mental illness often have nowhere else to turn. Additionally, in our communities, police are often called on individuals experiencing mental health crises, which leads to an escalation of problems and higher rates of incarceration for those individuals in distress. Additional mental health services would be an asset to the 6 cities in Connecticut that are disproportionately impacted by mass incarceration. Those cities are Bridgeport, Hartford, New Britain, New Haven, New London, and Waterbury. They make up 17% of the state's population, but more than half of the state's incarcerated population. Thus, providing broad community mental health services in these towns will lead to a decrease in the rates of people being incarcerated for untreated mental illness in the state overall. To truly address mental health needs of incarcerated people, we need to be treating the mental health of people who are currently incarcerated, but also have a broad access to mental health services in our community to decrease the rates of incarceration with those with mental health needs to begin with. The Appropriations Committee can make the first step here. Please reinvest the savings from closing Willard and the other prisons into mental health services for people currently incarcerated. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for your testimony. Next up, we have James Bandari Alexander. No. So we go to Melissa Streeter. Melissa Streeter, you're up. There you are.
Thank you. Madam Chair and distinguished members of the Appropriations Committee, thank you for holding this hearing to gather information about the governor's budget proposals for the upcoming fiscal year. My name is Melissa Streeto. I am a senior assistant state's attorney who has been employed in the Appellate Bureau of the Division of Criminal Justice for 22 years. I am also the president of the Connecticut Association of Prosecutors, which is the state association and bargaining unit that represents the deputy, assistant, senior, and supervisory state's attorneys within the division. I am here on my union's behalf to express concerns about key areas of the Division of Criminal Justice's budget proposals that were left unfunded by the governor's proposals. Our union strenuously urges this committee and the legislature to fully fund the division so that several vital issues may be addressed. First, and identified as our union's top priority, is to fully staff the division with a robust, diverse, and dedicated group of attorneys and support staff. With historically low numbers of prosecutors, we right now number only 203 from our high water mark of 262 well over a decade ago. Combined with the enormous backlog of cases occasioned by the COVID-19 pandemic, it has been difficult to meet basic functions and almost impossible to satisfy new statutory requirements around discovery and transparency. Proper staffing allows for realistic workloads that permit each case and each justice-impacted individual to be given the time and attention they deserve in order to further the union's goals of racial and social equity. Second is the need to properly fund the division while it brings technology and data collection up to modern standards. A digital discovery system, case management program, and technology infrastructure are all crucial to give prosecutors the tools necessary to meet the goals of speedy and fair justice for all, as well as to meet our statutory, constitutional, and ethical obligations. One prime example is the increasing use of police body camera footage, which takes more prosecutors, additional support staff, and better technology to properly review, to identify and rule out proper charges and suspects. As public servants, prosecutors can be a catalyst for restorative justice in the criminal justice system, but not without the funds, staff, resources, and technology required for modern-day prosecutors' offices. This body finally has a powerful tool to help fix systemic inequities by fully funding the Division of Criminal Justice to permit us to serve our most vulnerable and disadvantaged citizens. On behalf of the Connecticut Association of Prosecutors, I thank the committee for the opportunity to provide this verbal input as well as the written remarks I have provided. We look forward to utilizing the resources granted to the division to continue our legacy of integrity, fairness, and quest for justice. I would be happy to answer any questions posed by the committee. Thank you very much for allowing me to make my remarks.
Thank you. Thank you for your testimony.
Thank you.
Next up, we have Doug Holcomb.
Hi, thank you. Members of the committee, good evening, and thanks for providing an opportunity for me to provide testimony. This one's related to transportation. My name is Doug Holcomb. I'm the general manager at Greater Bridgeport Transit. We're providing the fixed route service and the ADA service, and we are now approaching 450,000 boardings a month on the fixed route service and another 7,000 door-to-door trips for riders with disabilities. And I'm here to speak really on three subjects. One is a package of proposed service enhancements that are included in the governor's budget prepared by the Department of Transportation. And then also just to raise awareness about the importance of maintaining the current services in the current environment, and also the same thing as it applies to ADA services. So last fall, for the first time in more than a decade, the department issued a call for projects, a kind of a competitive program to enhance current services. Many of those projects got included in the governor's budget. And I think it's kind of want to applaud the department for doing it that way. It's the first time in a long time that any transit operation in the state could have an opportunity to present some good projects. And we did that in the Bridgeport region. There are 3 projects that got included that'll help us really shore up the system that we have and make some routes that are currently peak period only all day. But there are some 28 similar projects all over the state in 11 different agencies. And it's really a great thing to see that, and I hope that that'll continue to be in the budget and be supported. The other 2 are kind of maybe more mundane, but the transit agencies all across the country felt the pandemic, like so many other companies and businesses. We are struggling with inflationary problems, wages and healthcare and fuel and those kinds of things. So in order to continue to operate the services that we have, we need to make sure we listen closely to what the department is asking for in their current services budget. And this is also true with the ADA services. So wherever there's city bus service for people with disabilities, for people without disabilities, there needs to be, as a matter of civil rights, service for people with disabilities. And in the governor's budget now, those services are flat funded. That really won't be workable, and that will lead to problems with the provision of service. So those I think are important. And just the last thing I'll say is while I'm awaiting my opportunity to testify tonight, I'm reminded again that so many of the weighty issues that the General Assembly and the state are grappling with have a mobility component. I think you'll agree that whether it's seniors, veterans, students, riders with disabilities, reentry, refugee, veterans, you name it, there's a mobility component to that. So I thank you for the opportunity to testify. You have my written testimony, and have a great night.
Thank you. Thank you for your testimony. Have a great night. Next up, we have Patrick Johnston.
Hello, good evening to the chairperson and to the committee members. I want to thank all of you for offering us the opportunity to speak. Very briefly, we are very appreciative of the funding that we've received, and of course, we are here to ask for your continued support. I'm the facilities manager for Connecticut Renaissance, and in order for my department to function, we need funding for the department. We need to hire and retain excellent technicians who maintain our multiple facilities. This is no easy task. Money is always tight. Many of our facilities are aging. We are working diligently to upgrade our facilities to provide a positive and safe home, temporary as it is, but a place to prepare our clients to reintegrate. We work to maintain an environment that benefits our clients and thereby benefits our communities. I hope that you can continue to support us in our mission to serve all of our communities and the whole state of Connecticut. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for your testimony. Next up, we have Jose Rivera.
Good evening, members of the Appropriation Committee. If you don't mind, I'd like to take a minute after I'm done for my friend here.
Sure,
I should want to clearly state that I grew up with 2 parents that were addicts. And because of that reason, I had a hard life. And I became an addict myself. And I dealt with multiple incarceration, also inpatient programs, and I have over 19 convictions. And this time around, I decided I want to do something different because I've been struggling all my life with addiction and massive incarceration. And I went to the Welcome Center, and Mr. Edgardo Reyes, that's here with me, actually strategized some plans and some goals for me to be a success. And because of that plan and that strategy, today I am a recovery coach with CCAR. I'm also in college for a bachelor's degree in substance abuse studies. And on top of that, they helped me with my license. So today my license is fully restored with their help. On top of that, I needed, because I was in a halfway house, I'm still in a halfway house. In order for me to have this job that I want, that they helped me get, is to be the manager for CCAR. I needed to transition. And they helped me with the funding and transitioning from the halfway house to a place where I could drive and have a vehicle. So if it wasn't for this type of resource, I wouldn't be a success today. And I just want to close by saying this is not just an investment that we're making in a building or a program. This is an investment that we're making into our community, that we're making into people like myself. And I hope that we can continue making some progress in this direction. Thank you.
Good evening, the Appropriations Committee. My name. Good evening, Appropriations Committee. My name is Jason Lamingo, and I am speaking tonight in support of creating a Justice Reinvestment Fund in the Department of Corrections budget from the savings obtained through the closing of Woodward Corrections. These dollars need to be reinvested back into programs and services that implement innovation, data-driven, comprehensive approaches to reducing crime, cut recidivism, and make our communities safer. One such program that I will speak about tonight is the Bridgeport Reentry Welcome Center. I myself was incarcerated since the age of 16 years old. Since being released from prison after 24 years, the Welcome Center was a segue to lead into all the programs and services that I've received since being released. I have successfully completed workforce development services, obtained my driver's license, and received forklift certification, and my OSHA 30 and 40 as well. Through the Bridgeport Reentry Welcome Center, I was able to find employment within 30 days of my release. Currently, I'm on a path to obtaining my CDLs through all state commercial driving, as well as going to Recovery Koch Academy School. All this was made possible through the Welcome Center, and I believe that moving forward, the Justice Reinvestment Fund should be best suited for welcome centers and programs that are designed to help returning citizens. In closing, I would like to thank you for the opportunity to participate in this public hearing. I hope that you will consider the creation of the Justice Reinvestment Fund under the DOC's budget from the savings recognized by the closing of Woodward Correctional Facility. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jonathan, and continue the great work. Next up, we have Katina Billings.
Hi, can everyone hear me?
Yes, we can. Please proceed.
Good evening, Madam Chair and the members of the committee. My name is Katina Billings. I'm the Program Director at Connecticut Renaissance Work Release Program. I would like to thank everyone for allowing me this opportunity to speak on behalf of the duties and the responsibilities of the staff at the Work Release Program. First, allow me to start off by giving a brief description of the Work Release Program. This program is to help inmates transition back into the community from prison by building their resumes, helping them establish financial savings once they become employed, and reunite with their families. We assist with referring clients that have mental illness, alcohol, or substance abuse to different outpatient programs. These are only naming a few things we offer to the clients. Our main journey is to provide services to the clients that can reduce the return rate of incarceration and keeping families together. The staff here have one of the hardest jobs, in my opinion. There's never a dull moment here. The monitors are the main source of service at the Work Release Program. All the staff always go above and beyond that requires their duties to help clients. Even when the day is tough, the staff must always stay calm. If there's a fight between the inmate, staff must try to de-escalate the situation in order for no one to get hurt. There have been times when a client could get mad enough or be under the influence and try to harm staff. Unlike correction officers, the staff here does not have many means of defense other than their verbal skills. One of the hardest times was during COVID. We were short-staffed. The staff put their health and their lives at risk to make sure the clients were taken care of. Staff brought clients their food and medication to their rooms just to keep everyone at a distance from each other. The staff made sure there were always coverage. If one staff got sick from COVID, their co-workers would come in and cover for them. I will never forget the day when the staff found their client deceased in his bed. They were able to keep the other clients calm and maintain order in the building. They witnessed the client's body being carried out the facility. That was a real sad day so far for this facility. The staff cried and expressed how hurt they felt. The monitors have saved lives of clients who overdosed from fentanyl and still came in the next day for their shift. I feel the service they provide is not appreciated. They do not make enough money for the work they provide. Most times the staff must work extra hours or days just to make enough money to take care of their families. There are young adults who graduated from high school and are working at Starbucks or McDonald's making more money than the staff at the work release program. And the young adults are in a safe environment. I could go on telling different stories about the staff and the hard work that they do every day, but I'm going to stop here and hope everybody thinks about some of the things I mentioned and I ask for an increase in pay for all of the staff for all of the hard work they do. Again, I thank you for this opportunity and have a good night.
Thank you for your testimony. Next up, we have Cooper Caraway.
Good evening.
Good evening.
My name is Cooper Caraway. I'm the proud executive director of the Service Employees International Union, SEIU, Connecticut State Council. We represent over 60,000 workers in every community across Connecticut. We are in a unique position as an organization because not only do we have DOC employees amongst our membership, but we also have former inmates as part of our membership, as well as many families of inmates and incarcerated people across our various locals in the state of Connecticut. That means that our organization is in a unique position to identify the needs, not only facing the staff of the Department of Corrections, but also facing incarcerated people and the needs facing them, their families, and our collective communities. Because of this, we've identified a few major needs. Number one, we need the allocation of $20 million to the DOC healthcare line item to address systemic understaffing of inmate medical services, expand access, and improve the quality of healthcare and mental health care services for the incarcerated. Increase the number of licensed mental health staff to reduce patient ratios and improve quality and increase access to mental health services. Require all mental health staff be certified in trauma-based treatments. Increase the number of medical providers in order to provide medical assessment within 14 days of intake and ensure a maximum patient to provider ratio of 1 to 600. Increase the number of dentists and support staff by 34 to provide annual dental screenings, ensure treatment plans are followed, and provide intake screening. Increase the number of OBGYNs and assist staff to ensure full coverage on weekends, holidays, and additional care as needed. Improve and expand discharge planning to improve communication, coordination, and provision of services internal to DOC and upon reentry. Increasing the number of discharge planners, establish a system for conservatorships to be reviewed and approved weekly, establish a regulatory oversight body over the DOC healthcare, establish comprehensive discharge planning, include the building trades in the vocational village within DOC, and work with the Connecticut State Building Trades Training Institute to support apprenticeship programs and job placement upon reentry, and work with the building trades to pass policy that would reduce the impact of background checks on the ability to find stable employment as people return to their communities. These changes can lead to an increased quality of life, not only for DOC staff, but for the temporarily incarcerated peoples in Connecticut, their families, and our greater communities. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your testimony. Next up, we have Constanza Segovia.
Hello, everybody. Senator Austin, Representative Walker, members of the Appropriations Committee. I'm here to testify on the governor's proposed budget for the Department of Corrections. My name is Constanza Segovia, and I live in Hartford. I'm an organizer with Hartford Deportation Defense, and we're here to stand up in support of the healthcare rights of our neighbors currently in DOC custody and their families. Our organization represents more than 170 immigrant families in the Hartford area, and we are members of the Husky for Immigrants Coalition and also Recovery for All Coalition. In our work for health equity in Connecticut and expanding access to Husky for folks regardless of immigration status, We have shared many stories of our members experiencing health emergencies and having tragic outcomes because of the lack of proper health care. I know that folks who are incarcerated or leaving incarceration also die of preventable causes because of inadequate care. And I worry that we are not prioritizing the basic human rights of all of our neighbors here in Connecticut. When we say healthcare is a human right, we mean that for everybody. When we say we work towards the well-being of Hartford neighbors, we include the 1,294 Hartford residents who are currently incarcerated and their families. We need the state budget to allocate $20 million to the DOC healthcare line item to address systemic understaffing of inmate medical services, expand access and improve the quality of healthcare and mental health care services for the incarcerated. We need more trauma-informed professionals on staff, and we need to make sure folks being discharged are getting the support they need, which also requires more staff and staff capacity. Closure of 3 prisons this year will net $25 million a year in extra funding. We want to ask that funding go into DOC services like educational programming and DOC healthcare staff, as well as spending it on expansion of reentry services like hiring formerly incarcerated community health workers and creating a DOC healthcare oversight board. Additionally, the human rights crisis is already costing the state of Connecticut. We have paid out millions of dollars in lawsuits related to the medical negligence with the Department of Corrections. This is not only the right thing to do, but it's also the fiscally responsible thing to do. With billions of dollars available in the state's budget surplus and the rainy day fund, it's time to invest in a fully expanded, well-coordinated healthcare safety net anchored by a robust public healthcare sector. Connecticut can be a model in truly taking care of its people. We should and can restore and expand services and save lives. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Next up, we have Signy Alstein.
Good evening. My name is Sydney Olstein, and I'm from Meriden Wallingford Chrysalis, a domestic violence agency. 26 days. I have been an official employee of Meriden Wallingford Chrysalis for 26 days. In these 26 days, I alone have had 50 clients. My job description as civil legal advocate instructs me to guide all of these people through any civil issues they may encounter whilst in the midst of a domestic violence situation. These legal proceedings are complicated and often require years of intense and focused education to understand. Many of our clients are going at this alone with limited resources and hearts full of fear and their bodies carrying the weight of ongoing trauma. To have an advocate there with them each step of the way becomes invaluable to someone whose safety depends on the accuracy of these processes. For example, writing an affidavit requires delicate thinking and pragmatic wording to persuade the judge there's imminent danger to the client. This is hardly something someone can know intrinsically, for it requires training and much trial and error, something our clients do not have the privilege of having time for. The VOCA grant allows me to be side by side with my client through this process so they may acquire relief as quickly as possible, often saving their life. Notably, VOCA has served as a liaison, allowing us to acquire top-tier legal representation to our clients. For those that just missed the qualifying salary for ZT Legal Services, it can feel hollowing and hopeless to know that representation is unavailable to you, barely out of reach. For one of my clients, this was the case. Their salary did not allow them to utilize CT Legal Services, but they also did not make enough to afford the rates of attorneys in the area. As they were denied protection from their first restraining order, the client cried into my arms. They told me, and I quote, "If I die tonight, please remember me. Remember my name and tell everyone that I warned them." This client is also disabled. They are completely deaf and require sign language interpreters for each meeting, as well as in the courtroom. Their sorrow and terror as they were left vulnerable to a cohabitating abuser showed me how desperately we have to do something for them. VOCA funds allowed us to find them deaf-aware representation, as well as allowed me to advocate ruthlessly for them to have interpretation in the courtroom. After weeks of exhaustion, sleeping with one eye open, and tear-jerking bravery from my client, they are free. They said to me, "I realized I only made it through today because you were there with me. I hope you know you were my key, and I will be forever grateful that you were assigned to my case." This is VOCA. VOCA is lethality assessment follow-ups, legal representation for those at rock bottom, and it is the celebratory embrace and tears of joy that run down the face of a legally protected victim. VOCA is counseling sessions where clients unpack their trauma and build healthy relationships. Cutting VOCA funding in half immensely decreases the services we can provide to a profoundly vulnerable population. Victims will continue to die, and cycles of abuse will perpetuate themselves for centuries to come. We have an opportunity to continue this work and to help the people in the state of Connecticut. I stand before you with tears in my eyes and determination that glows red in my heart, and ask that the VOCA grant budget remains untouched by cuts, not for me, for my colleagues, or for my job or for theirs, but for the victims we see every day whose safety, futures, and frankly, their lives depend on our services. Thank you for holding this testimony tonight, and I hope we see some work.
Thank you. Thank you for your testimony. Next up, we have Rebecca Simonson.
Yep, I'm here. Good evening, members of the committee. My name is Becky Simonson. I'm a vice president with District 1199 New England, representing healthcare workers across Connecticut, including 7,000 healthcare workers working directly for state agencies, at 600 of which work in the Department of Corrections. And I'm here today to testify in support of increased funding, an additional $20 million for DOC inmate medical services, and for the reinvestment of funding from prison closures into medical, mental health, and reentry services. And we've submitted expanded written testimony with a breakdown of these needs. The systemic understaffing of health services in DOC prevents our members, 1199 members, from upholding their constitutional mandate to provide quality health care. It prevents them from providing the care that people simply deserve by virtue of the fact that they're human beings. Right now, there are 224 healthcare vacancies within the DOC. There are over 2,500 vacancies statewide across state agencies. But in the DOC, there are 93 nurse vacancies, representing a 44% vacancy rate. If we valued the lives of the people who remain incarcerated in the state and the people who provide them care, this astronomical vacancy rate shouldn't be acceptable. And so without action to expand healthcare and mental health care services, the staffing crisis will continue to have really tragic consequences. Staffing ratios are so unsafe right now for the incarcerated population that they have to often wait months to see a doctor, only for their sicknesses to become more emergent and painful and costly. 1199 members routinely report that preventative care is simply impossible under current conditions. They are doing the best they can to triage emergencies. 1199 members are frequently forced to work under protest in several facilities. They're mandated to stay at work over and over and over again, required to triage crises rather than act proactively, and frequently work below the already unsafe minimum staffing levels. This is just inhumane and immoral. It's a matter of racial justice. As we know, mass incarceration disproportionately harms Black and Brown communities. It's a matter of gender justice, as the lack of reproductive care in DOC impacts incarcerated women. And unfortunately, up until this point, DOC has not hired enough new staff in response to the staffing crisis and the unsafe conditions it has produced. So since July 1 of 2022, the DOC has hired only 83 healthcare staff, while 35 have left the agency. And this net gain of 50 staff does not come even close to addressing the dire situation that we face. And so we believe that the state's approach to addressing the staffing crisis really needs to be doing whatever needs to be done, whatever is necessary to recruit and retain the healthcare staff to meet the needs of the people who are incarcerated. We know we have the resources to do this. We have multiple billions of dollars in surplus. And an overflowing rainy day fund. And so we really have to allocate the funding to provide quality care to people who are incarcerated. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your testimony. Next up, we have Hannah Hannah Sullivan.
Good evening. My name is Hannah Sullivan. I'm a physician assistant with the Department of Corrections and a member of 1199. Physician assistants are advanced practice medical providers that diagnose, treat, and manage all medical conditions. I'm here today to ask that you use the $25 million that the state will be saving from prison closure to fund DOC healthcare so that we have enough staff to deliver the kind of care that we know incarcerated people deserve. I've been practicing as a physician assistant for nearly 10 years, and in that time, I have never worked with a population as medically complicated, vulnerable, and challenging as the one I serve within the DOC. I have also never worked within such an under-resourced setting. I truly regard it as a privilege to serve my community by providing for the medical needs of the inmate population, including responding to all medical emergencies, treating both acute and chronic disease, and providing health education. Receiving quality medical care while incarcerated is life-saving. As medical providers, we should be providing care using community standards. However, we are too short-staffed to do this. I too often need to do the work of nurses, which strains my ability to treat patients. I have also been repeatedly required to cover for physicians, both within my own facility and at other jails and prisons that are chronically understaffed. As a physician assistant, I bring surgical skills that I have been able to use to limit the amount of specialty appointments and emergency trips needed by our patients. I've also trained my colleagues, both APRNs and physicians, to do the same. Despite this, the DOC still is unable to recruit physician assistants because our salary is so below the private sector and that which is represented by our APRN colleagues. Physician assistants save lives and are integral to providing comprehensive health care in our prisons and jails. Please expand DOC healthcare services to save lives. You can do this by allocating $20 million to the DOC healthcare line item to address systemic understaffing of inmate medical services, increase the number of medical providers by 12 or more to provide medical assessment within 14 days of intake, and ensure a maximum patient to provider ratio of 1 to 600. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for your testimony. And now we'll turn it over to my colleague, Representative Rosario.
Thank you, Representative Candelaria. Up next, we have April Brodeur.
Good evening, members of the committee. My name is April Brodeur. I appreciate the opportunity to speak today on the need to raise assigned counsel rates and for your time and attention to this important matter. I've served as assigned counsel for 20 years, and I have owned a firm handling assigned counsel cases for 8 years. I've made many sacrifices to continue to do this supremely important work because it is so very important to me personally. But because of turnover caused by an inability to pay competitively, my firm has not accepted assignments for some time. We've also chosen not to renew certain contracts. We cannot take on additional cases, and this isn't unique to my firm. All firms are experiencing these same issues. And it's because the difference between assigned counsel rates and private rates is staggering. Hourly rates in private cases are on average nearly 5 times those of assigned counsel hourly rates, and in some situations it may be 10 times or more. And once taxes and expenses are paid, assigned counsel who are properly handling a $400 GA case are often working for less than minimum wage and are sometimes literally paying out of pocket to handle that case. And it greatly incentivizes slipshod work, which leads to more post-conviction cases, claiming error, and more expense. But this request is really about our clients. And what it means to be an American is inextricably linked to our constitutional rights, no matter what side of the political aisle you're on. The importance of our constitutional rights is universally acknowledged, admired, and championed. And it has been justly observed that public defense and assigned counsel systems make real the promise of the Bill of Rights. And our Sixth Amendment right to counsel was the framers' unmistakable declaration that the enormous power and resources of the government shall not be wielded against us as citizens unchecked. But this right is being undermined by inadequate funding in our state. The low rates create a constructive denial of our Sixth Amendment right to counsel, and perhaps even unwaivable conflicts of interest, structural error, per se prejudice, equal protection issues. We are absolutely and systemically depriving defendants and petitioners of their constitutional rights through low assigned counsel rates. And we will be reverting to a charitable defender model. It will become a crisis within our state that magnifies the already grave racial disparities in our state's criminal justice system. People of color will yet again disproportionately be on the receiving end of the outcomes that will occur when the experienced and skilled defense attorneys are forced to put down their sabers in order to simply make a living. As Representative Candelaria eloquently said earlier today, our indigent are going to court not with a sword and a shield, but with a white flag. And when viewed purely through the lens of fiscal responsibility, the rates being paid are penny wise and pound foolish. It's less expensive to pay contractors than to hire state employees. Higher rates greatly reduce the costly turnover.
You can summarize your testimony, please.
Of course. We reduce the collateral consequences, promote public safety, and really comes down to an issue of fairness. Who can afford private counsel? Those people don't face the same issues and challenges as indigent defendants and petitioners. Our country simply can't deliver on its most celebrated promise of equal justice without every accused person having access to quality representation, because the defense of the rights of one of us is the defense of all of us. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your testimony. Up next, we have Leslie Hebert via Zoom, followed by Ellen Durko. Leslie Bumpus.
I thought you said Leslie Hebert. Is it Leslie Bumpus or Leslie Hebert?
I don't know, is it Bumpus?
Leslie Haber's here in person.
So you want me to go?
You can
Is
go
there-
Which
ahead.
one?
Leslie's. Okay.
Haber,
thank you.
Haber.
All
Okay.
right. Hi, my name is Leslie Hebert. Thank you, Senator Austin, Representative Walker, and members of the committee. I'm an elected organizer with 1199, and I have the privilege of working with healthcare staff who provide care to people who are incarcerated in the Department of Corrections. They provide physical and mental health care for these folks. And the biggest challenge we're facing right now is the Department of Corrections has a severe staffing shortage, which stands in the way of allowing our members to provide the health care that's required to meet community standards. This summer, our delegate leaders listed solutions to the recruitment crisis and presented them to Commissioner Quiros, his staff, at a labor management meeting. Some of the things that we did and proposed worked. So, for example, centralizing LPN hiring events have produced results. We've been able to move agency staff and per diems who were interested into permanent positions into those jobs. The interview process was streamlined. HR agreed and did streamline the process for background checks, and we were able to speed up physicals. Our APRNs pulled together and were able to get reclassed as psych APRNs, which means that we now have another group of people who are going to be eligible to be prescribers, which is going to potentially solve that problem. Despite all of this, though, we're not close to resolving the staffing crisis at the Department of Corrections in terms of healthcare services. The agency still has 69 full-time RN vacancies, 49 full-time LPN vacancies. We need RNs on every shift in each facility. And unfortunately, the RNs have not applied in the numbers needed. Many of those who have come for interviews haven't taken the jobs. The raises we recently negotiated simply do not compete with the private sector for RN pay. Another challenge is that the current pay structure does not encourage LPNs who have gone to school and become RNs to stay with the state. One of our members who's been an LPN for 14 years just studied and became an RN, and at this point she's making less than $2 an hour more than she was when she was an LPN. We have to fix that. Our mental health staff is working really hard, but they don't have enough staff, and we need a structure to provide trauma-informed care. We need other therapies. People need to be able to be hired. People need to be able to do the work. We have to have the resources to provide these folks who are incarcerated in Connecticut with the health care that they are constitutionally required to receive. We need you guys to allocate $20 million to the Department of Corrections healthcare line item to address the systemic understaffing of inmate medical services, expand services, mental health care, and services for the incarcerated.
Thank you so much. Right at the bell. Thank you for your testimony.
Right, thank you.
Thank you. We have Ellen Durko. Is Ellen Durko available on remote? If not, oh, she's in person. It says remote here. I'm sorry. Good evening.
Good evening, sir. Good evening, Madam Chair, and all distinguished members of the Appropriation Committee. My name is Ellen Durko, and I'm a mental health nurse at Cybulski. Cybulski is a reintegration center. This means incarcerated individuals reside and given proper treatment shouldn't come back. We have specialized programs including DUI recovery, the Veterans Unit, which collaborates with the VA, and the reintegration program that allows incarcerated individuals to work in the community. We also have the GED program, some college classes on site, the CCAR program, which gives incarcerated individuals certification to be recovery coaches. Our mental health clinicians are mandated to see their patients on their caseloads twice a month. The reality is, with the time spent in crisis management, it's impossible to see the assigned caseload. As of today, the population here at Cybulski is 535 incarcerated individuals and only 2 mental health clinicians. If one of the clinicians is sick or on vacation, the other clinician is expected to cover the entire caseload. And should both of them be out, no one covers because the minimal staffing level for mental health clinicians is 0. This is a travesty. The State Sentencing Commission report coming out in March states approximately 80% of the incarcerated population suffers from addiction and or mental health illnesses. Our facility today at Cybulski alone would be 400 inmates needing mental health therapy. This is an impossibility given our current staffing. Just today, while interviewing a new admission, a 21-year-old said to me, "I never thought I would get a high school diploma, do great in college classes I've taken, and get certified as a barber. The Manson Youth Program changed my life. The counselor there helped all of us. I want to keep going to community college when I get out." Imagine how many others could be positively impacted by a fully funded and staffed mental health program here in corrections. Our incarcerated people in this state all deserve to be restored to their full potential and can and do turn their lives around. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. I understand Indria Mito is here in person, not in remote. So if you can come up, then followed by Leslie Bumpus. Thank you, Leslie, for your patience.
Good evening, Madam Chair and members of the committee. My name is Indria Mito. I'm a registered nurse. I work at Osborne Correctional Institute, and I am an 1199 delegate. I'm here to ask you to fund more mental health staff positions with DOC Healthcare and to fund mental health reentry programs. We need more staff to assist all who need our care. We also need space at facilities to provide privacy for individual meetings. We must produce a system that holistically addresses the plans that will assist all mentally ill individuals. I am encouraged by existing collaborations between DOC and those providing mental health services. Inmates are released. When I worked as a discharge planner in 2020, I had a case where the inmate was on the spectrum. He was not mentally capable of taking care of himself, but not mentally ill enough to enter a hospital. Before his release, one of the officers and I convinced him to get access by Assessment Pro. He was released from prison with no placement. He served his time and we could no longer hold him. Shortly after his release, he was placed in an inpatient unit because of statements that he made. Having Assessment Pro allowed him mental health coverage. He called to thank me for our help. There's much more that needs to be done. Our facilities are short-staffed. Our mental health staff does not currently have adequate office space to provide quality care. Please allocate $20 million to the DOC healthcare line item to address systemic understaffing of medical services, expand access and improve the quality of healthcare and mental health services for the incarcerated. In addition, please increase the number of discharge planners by 8, requiring all discharge inmates to be provided with state IDs and medical records. Please also ensure coordination and access for community health workers to work with individuals preparing for release. Because of the huge barriers in communities of colors face, because of the huge barriers that communities of color face in terms of employment, housing, healthcare, and education, people leave prison and often lack the support system necessary to find jobs, healthcare, housing, and schools. We need the programs, the people to follow them, the people to encourage them, both inside correctional facilities and in the community upon release. I want to say, Mr. Tremaine was one of my inmates that was released, and I seen him when he came in and I seen him when he left. And he is one of the success stories that I can speak of. So I thank you for your time.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you for your testimony. We have Leslie Bumpus.
Thank you so much, Representative Rosario. Good evening. Good evening, Madam Chair and committee members. My name is Dr. Leslie Bumpus, and I'm one of the lead dentists for the Department of Corrections. I'm a public health graduate student at UConn, and I'm also an 1199 union delegate. As a dentist, I treat infection, diagnose disease, and educate patients on oral health and disease prevention. I relieve people's pain, and I restore missing teeth to attain a better quality of life. I am proud of the work that I do. However, all of our dental staff are severely underpaid compared to the private sector and several other states. This is significant because low pay makes it nearly impossible to recruit and hire dentists to work for the Department of Corrections. Our patients are constitutionally entitled to receive adequate, timely, and equitable health care. They must be provided with annual dental exams, treatment plans must be followed, and decreasing health inequities are all crucial components of the job. With 10,000 incarcerated individuals and only 10 dentists serving this population, routine and preventative care cannot be performed. A simple filling diagnosed a year ago eventually turns into a tooth extraction because we are constantly putting out fires and only able to treat emergency and infections. Poor oral health is a precursor for heart disease, diabetes, and other chronic illnesses. According to NCCHC statistics, we are already behind the 8 ball regarding healthcare needs. Oral cancer screening should be performed on every single patient, as dentists are able to catch oral cancer at an early stage. It is not unheard of that cancer is caught at a late stage due to inadequate patient to staff ratios. Late stage cancer and constant tooth extractions negatively impacts this particularly vulnerable population in more ways than one. DOC had a handful of applicants for open dentist positions, but nearly all of them turned down the positions due to the current pay and benefit package. To have the capacity to actually provide quality care, the number of dentists, dental assistants, and dental hygienists must be increased by 34. The continued short staffing will lead to foreseeable harm to our patients, as there's just not enough staff to treat everyone in a timely manner. The state has the responsibility to provide equitable health services for our patients. Incarcerated individuals are entitled to the same rights and level of health care as people that are not incarcerated. However, health disparity still exists, as we do not have adequate amount of healthcare personnel. Lastly, I would like to add that I serve on the 1199 New England DOC Recruitment and Retention Subcommittee. We have spoken with our mental health staff, medical providers, dental providers, discharge planners, etc., to determine what each group needs to provide even the minimum standard of care for our patients. Across the board, all of the healthcare and mental health staff want to provide quality care, but are often unable to because of the staffing crisis. Inadequate staffing levels will perpetuate health disparities. We have the resources to do whatever it takes to recruit quality staff, but this is simply not being done. To address years of systemic understaffing of inmate medical services, expand access, and improve the quality of healthcare and mental health care services for the incarcerated population, $20 million must be allocated to the DOC healthcare line item. We must allocate $30 million for recruitment and retention of healthcare staff.
Summarize.
Healthcare staff for all state agencies, including DOC. Access to healthcare is a human right that we must invest in, especially in one of the richest states in the country with an astronomical budget surplus. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Dr. Bumpus.
Thank you very much.
Sarah Phelps.
Thank you, Representative Rosario. Good evening, Senator Austin, Representative Walker, and members of the committee. My name is Kara Phillips, and I'm a nurse supervisor within the DOC. and an 1199 delegate. As a supervisor, I run the medical department at Corrigan. I help my staff to have everything they need to perform their job well, and together we build a culture with custody to work together to provide services to the incarcerated population in a timely fashion. I'm an advocate for them, and because of that, I'm here today to ask you to fund DOC healthcare and reentry services so that we can provide a community level of care for the individuals that we care for. I love being a nurse and helping others. I love developing a staff and a team of nurses who also want to work hard to provide healthcare services to our patients and the care to live better lives once they're released. The more funding would allow us to hire more full-time staff within DOC. As a state, we are finally heading in the right direction of providing the best care possible within a correctional setting. Now we just need the nurses, social workers, doctors, dentists, and more to be able to provide the community level of care that our patients deserve. It is hard to recruit healthcare professionals into this field, especially when they're taking a pay cut to come and work for us. Once we do get the opportunity to get them inside, many do want to join our team. But we need to recruit and retain these employees with competitive salaries. Because of short staffing, I and many of my colleagues are exhausted and have very low morale. At certain times, there are only a handful of nurses still able to work that didn't have COVID. And instead of giving up, we all dug deeper and worked harder to continue to provide the services that our patients deserved and needed. We still have a job to do, and there's no choice but to work harder and longer. We will always continue to do that, but it isn't fair to us and to our patients. Please help us to provide all the care that we want to be able to provide to our patients by increasing funding to DOC healthcare and reentry services. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you for your testimony. Up next, we have Carl Chisholm. Carl Chisholm.
Representative Rosario. Good evening, Senator Austin, Representative Walker, and members of the Appropriations Committee. My name is Carl Chisholm, and I am the president of Connecticut Employees Union Independent SEIU Local 511, otherwise known as NP2 Bargaining Unit. Our union represents over 6,000 active and retired blue-collar maintenance and service state workers who provide valuable services within our state facilities and our state roads, including many job classifications that fall within the Department of Transportation. Currently, the state of Connecticut is facing a shortage of workforce for CDL truck drivers. As a local who represents public sector employees who perform such work, we have talked to many agencies, including Department of Transportation, who say they simply cannot get enough qualified applicants due to the problem within the Department of Transportation. We currently have a memorandum of understanding which allows QCW mechanics to be hired with the CDL, without a CDL, and the DOT, and send them, the DOT will send them for training to acquire their CDL during the first few months of employment. This was necessary due to the lack of candidates who had CDLs, but were otherwise qualified even with recent pay increases with our new collective bargaining agreement. However, funding for that training will not be available after the fiscal year. So it is a short-term fix. This is just the example of how the state is losing money in real time by not having a more inclusive and competitive, comprehensive training program in place for the job titles. In the last 12 months, Department of Transportation has hired approximately 250 workers into job classifications covered by our bargaining unit, at all which customarily require CDL in order to be hired. A CDL costs approximately $2,200, which means that it would have a cost of about $55,000 to provide those workers with the CDLs on state time. We can nearly double the number of new hires we bring into the department doing the work for only $100,000 in CDL training. This would put us on a par with most municipalities hiring for similar positions within the last year, while in the last year NP2 contract would ideally help with recruitment by assuring that their wage scale is more on track with what we're seeing people making in the private sector for similar jobs. That is only one way we could be encouraging recruitment into the agency. While bringing CDL certificates back in-house for these jobs titles would be a effective and affordable way to increase recruitment. It doesn't go nearly far enough. New York State has one of the most comprehensive training programs in the country for recruiting and retaining the vital workforce.
Mr. Chisholm,
New York State DOT highway worker service is the most made up of 4-step employment and training program that is not only included in house TDL, but is also provides valuable cross-training opportunities in the workforce.
Mr. Chisholm, if you
Thank
could
you for the
summarize.
opportunity, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Thank you for your testimony.
Thank you.
I'm not sure if Judge Norris is here in person. Okay, and we have Jay Stange.
Yeah, good evening. Thank you to the chair and distinguished members of the Appropriations Committee. I admire your Zoom stamina and patience. Thank you so much for putting up with us tonight. I'm Jay Stange, and I work as coordinator for Transport Hartford Academy. It's a program of the nonprofit Center for Latino Progress, and I'm grateful to appear before you today to comment on Governor Lamont's recommended 24-25 biennial operating budget for the Department of Transportation. I advocate for safe, equitable access to transit, walking, bicycling, and other mobility options for residents of the Capital Region. And we have a focus on our Latino residents. A third of our families and neighborhoods we serve don't own a car, and another third of households own just one car, often underinsured and likely to be a potentially unreliable older model. Public transit is asked to be many things. It's an alternative to single occupancy car use for those trying to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. It's safer than car travel for those concerned about rising rates of fatalities on our roads. And it's a place where some seek shelter from extreme heat or cold in Connecticut. For one friend of mine, an immigrant like me from another country in the Americas, the CT Transit bus is the only way she can get to several locations where she has housekeeping jobs. For returning citizens coming out of incarceration, the bus is a lifeline for making PO meetings or getting to job interviews, which are often a condition of parole. Many elderly or disabled residents have testified in support of free CT Transit bus fares in resolutions that were passed in New Haven, Hartford, and Stamford. For many, free bus fares mean they can go shopping and get medical services. So I'm grateful to state leaders like Commissioner Eucalito for making free fares on CT Transit possible with Federal Rescue Act funding since April 1st of last year, and for extending it twice. Federal funding for the program is scheduled to end on March 31st. That's approximately $32 million that was allocated. Commissioner Eucalito noted in his testimony to the committee this morning that CT Transit ridership is back to pre-pandemic levels. But the governor's budget makes no reference to continuing this very successful program. Commissioner Eucalito said there may be limitations in federal law and transit guidelines to extending this program beyond 12 months, even with state funding. But perhaps there is a creative solution. According to a Connecticut Mirror newspaper article citing a letter from the Office of Policy Management, even with gas tax holidays, the Special Transportation Fund will end the year more than $200 million in the black. So please consider investing part of this transportation surplus in supporting the Connecticut residents who need it most. We can provide millions of crucial transit rides to residents and the bus operators who watch out for them for less than the price of a highway interchange. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jay. Thank you for your testimony. Next, we have Alyssa Martin, followed by Michael Castro.
Great. Good evening, and thank you to the distinguished members of the committee for your time and attention. As stated, my name is Alyssa Martin, and I am representing New Horizons Domestic Violence Services. New Horizons is one of the 18-member programs of the Connecticut Coalition Against Domestic Violence and provides life-saving services to the victims of intimate partner violence in all 15 towns of Middlesex County here in Connecticut. Along with my colleagues who have spoken tonight, I'm asking you for your continued assistance in addressing the Federal Victims of Crime Act, or VOCA, funding gap. For New Horizons, a 50% VOCA funding cut would mean less emergency resources for our clients, such as hotels for immediate shelter or travel expenses for clients who need to leave the state to escape their violent partners, as well as reduced staffing at our court office. During the pandemic, the demand for our services increased by 52%, and the demand for our VOCA funded services increased by 35%. During the fiscal year 2022, our only two VOCA funded court advocates served nearly 1,200 victims, and 75% of the services provided by New Horizons during the previous fiscal year were funded by VOCA. A longtime client, Jay, is one of the many who has benefited from our VOCA funded services. After repeated attempts against her life, including an incident where Jay's offender attempted to stab her while pregnant, Jay reported her offender to the police using evidence she had collected for over a year. After his arrest, our court advocates worked with the state's attorney's office on Jay's behalf for her offender to have a GPS ankle monitoring and placed under house arrest until the court date, which was granted. Jay's offender was sentenced to 5 years in jail with 5 years probation, and Jay was granted a lifetime restraining order against her abuser, which is rare for these cases. This was possible through the support provided to Jay by our VOCA-funded court advocates, as well as Jay's efforts as a survivor in her own case. My colleagues and I understand, and as expressed by others this evening, that the VOCA funding gap was not created by Connecticut or any other state, but again, the 50% cut to VOCA funding will impact the almost 40,000 survivors and their families in Connecticut currently affected by domestic violence. Without this support, my colleagues and I will have to tell our clients that key services we used to offer either no longer exist or cannot be accomplished in the same capacity. This is a heartbreaking prospect. Survivors put their safety, their finances, their families, and often their lives at risk by reaching out for help. Because of the many barriers they face, survivors often take months and even years after an assault to make a police report and go through the court process. I want to be able to tell the person who called for help, despite these risks, that we can still provide the meaningful support and resources that are possible through this funding. So to that end, I adamantly encourage the committee to provide the additional $20 million required to address this funding gap issue, in addition to Governor Lamont's proposal for the fiscal year 2024, so that we can keep victim services intact. Thank you.
Thank you, Alyssa. Thank you for your testimony. We're headed down the stretch. Michael Castro. Good evening.
Good evening, Representative Rosario, Senator, ladies and gentlemen of the committee. My name is Michael Castro. I'm here to speak tonight on Justice Reinvestment Fund. On September 5th of 2022, excuse me, after 17 years, 9 months, 26 days, I was released from prison. On the third day out from prison, I came in contact with Scott Wilderman from Career Resources, and he helped guide me to the Welcome Center to CCAR Career Resources. Since then, I was able to obtain my license, gain employment, learn how to use a computer again, because after all that time in prison, I didn't know how to use a computer. Sometimes I don't even know how to use the phone right now. I got to use my grandchildren. But through the Welcome Center, through Career Resources, through CCAR, I was able to reinvent myself to a point to where I'm a productive member of the community because of the classes, because of the time that they take. The Welcome Center is filled with ladies and gentlemen that speak the language of someone that went through something, because most of them went through it themselves, which is a very important part of that. taking away funding or not having enough funding for these welcome centers is going to increase instead of decrease recidivism. Because these gentlemen and ladies that come out of incarceration need to relearn themselves. And this is what these programs teach them. They teach them to relearn themselves. They teach them to be back in a positive mindset. When they're slipping, they have someone there to help them get up. When they don't understand something, they have someone that they could go to explain it to them. These programs and these centers are such an important part of each community, the state, to reduce recidivism. With the closing of the prisons and all this extra funding that's available, it should be a no-brainer to reinvest in these ladies and gentlemen that are trying to do the right thing now. Closing of a welcome center, closing of a program because of not enough funding that's available to them is going to increase the recidivism. It's not going to decrease it. These programs are so important. Today, I established through going to these programs and dealing with everyone in these programs. I myself also I'm going to CCAR Academy to be a recovery coach. I'm teaching classes. I'm involved in the community. I'm helping guide, and I'm being guided by individuals that I never thought I would even be mingling with. And it's so beneficial because of these programs. The funding for these programs, I was able to get my ID. I'm still working on my driver's license. I was able to gain employment to where I was able to now establish a business on my own. It's only been 4 months and 20 days since I've been out of prison. I have a job. I have support. I'm able to reach out to anyone in any one of these programs for guidance, and they're more than willing, ready, and able to help me. With that being said, I thank you guys for hearing my testimony, and I really would appreciate if you consider allocating a big chunk of them funds for these programs because they're very well needed for our community and for our state. Thank you very much.
Mr. Castro, thank you for your testimony, and I personally seen your growth, your personal growth, and the positive impact that you have made to our community. So I want to thank you for your patience, and I know your family is very proud of you.
Thank you, Representative Rosario. Thank you.
Matthew Costello. Is Matthew Costello on Zoom? Kevin Black? That's the last one. Kevin Black.
Sorry about that. Coming on. Thank you. Boy, I tell you, Mr. Castro is going to be a tough person to follow. He is the ideal person that I'm here to speak on behalf of in asking for additional funding for the assigned counsel program through the Office of the Chief Public Defender. It's people like him that cause us to get up every day and go to work and try to do our best to either reduce the time that they spend in prison or help them not spend any time in prison at all. Again, my name is Kevin Black. I'm happy to bat in the 9 hole here tonight, and I'm a partner at the law firm of Bear & Black in Wilton, Connecticut. I first became an assigned counsel, then a special public defender in 2006. I have done it straightforward ever since then, despite the rates that we are paid right now. And the reason being is because it fills a incredibly vital and important function that our criminal justice system needs to function in the best way that it can for the socioeconomically disadvantaged, the poor, the people of color, the inner cities, but for anybody who simply can't afford a private attorney. And I'm not going to repeat, I hope, what a lot of the brother and sister attorneys who have appeared here tonight have said, because they were very eloquent, and I was very honored to be an attorney tonight and listening to them. But what I do is I'm a week removed from finishing a very complex murder trial in Stamford, Connecticut that ended last Friday. During that case, my son and I, who tried it with me, who's an associate at my firm, we had to cross-examine a forensic biologist, a forensic DNA expert, a blood spatter expert, a pathologist, a forensic anthropologist, a fingerprint expert. We had to know cell tower data. We had to know geolocation data. We had to do motions to suppress unlawful seizures. We had to do motions to suppress unlawful interrogations. We had to challenge more than 6 search warrants, just to give you an idea of the level of knowledge and expertise that is needed to properly defend serious criminal cases in Connecticut. Somebody said earlier, nobody's looking to get rich doing this. I do this in Lower Fairfield County. I serve Stamford, I serve Danbury, and I serve Bridgeport. And being able to do this type of work in those areas of the state is made even more complicated due to the high cost of living down here. And I track these numbers at my firm because we're a somewhat larger firm than a lot of the solo practitioners who do this. And we make about $20 to $25 an hour on these cases for the most part. We do it because it's critically important, not because we make money on it and not because we're going to get rich doing it. But we would like to at least be paid a reasonable fee for the very important work that we do. So I'm going to end by saying, if nothing changes right now, I've never seen a groundswell like I've seen lately from the most experienced assigned counsels saying that they simply won't do this work anymore. And if that doesn't change, the last assigned counsels standing are going to be very young, inexperienced attorneys looking to build a business, or, I hate to say this, unmotivated attorneys who can't or won't be able to build their own business, so they will take what's ever offered to them. Those are not the people that we want defending these very serious cases for the people who are disproportionately impacted by the criminal justice system. Thank you so much for staying up this late for me, letting me speak. And I know you have a lot of very difficult decisions to make, and I thank you for making them.
Thank you, Kevin. Seeing that there are no further speakers, I want to thank our incredibly hardworking staff for hanging tough all day. Thank you so much. Let's give them a round of applause virtually. And for us members that are here, thank you so much. Have a good night.